anatomy of my talk, if you will. So what is Copilot 365? Going through that, see what the Copilot experience, the AI-assisted experience is like in those applications. And then secondly, how you can extend it as a developer. And thirdly, I thought I'd tee up my dear co-speakers into how you could build various plugins for various type of applications. I will, however, show an example of how to use it a little bit for Bing, but I'm sure my other speaker colleagues are going to fill in the details. So, Copilot for 365. Many of us are thinking Office 365, right? We're thinking Word, we're thinking PowerPoint, and a bunch of other apps. But imagine a world where you are being AI assisted. I'm sure half the room who hasn't used it, I bet you've seen some videos somewhere, right? You have some kind of prompt interface, you're trying to prompt, and suddenly it knows stuff generally about the internet, but also about your company data. So the idea with this, the value that this is adding is that it should improve your everyday workflows. Because many of us are using PowerPoints, we're using Word, we're using Excel, we're trying to get that extra value, and we don't want to spend a bunch of time to find the data wherever it lives on the company drive, right? We just want to have something at our fingertips. So 365, right? This is what it looks like from Bing. So if you go into this kind of dashboard, you can just type whatever you want here at the bottom. That's the promise of the future, right? The promise of the future is that it is prompt first, and prompt being a natural language sentence. Any language. That's fantastic, right? I mean, as a developer for more than 20 years, I've had to build specific localization for different languages, right? And imagine not having to do that because it just understands you in Spanish or Swahili or Swedish. By the way, I'm Swedish. So that's fantastic, right? Just imagine being a user in this world where you just type in whatever language you have, the underlying AI model understands you and it's able to point you to that company data. That's going to save a bunch of time for a lot of people. So get help authoring in Word, that's one value. Get help creating forms. How many of you are creating forms currently? Surveys. Not super fun, right? It takes a lot of time. You try to come up with some good questions and you're like, yeah, I got 11 questions. I need 13. I don't know what to ask, right? But then there's also Excel. Many of us want to have data insights from Excel, right? Want to be able to use Copilot or an AI system to say, what does this data tell me? 2,000 rows of whatever is going on here, right? Or PowerPoint. I mean, enjoy creating a PowerPoint deck. Oh, wow. I mean, I'm creating decks quite often, and I can tell you, I need an assistant to do it for me faster, right? I'm super happy when a colleague of mine say, hey, you know what, Chris, I have a deck. And I'm like, oh, yes, thank you, right? And hopefully it's vice versa. But then you have emails, right? And we're part of long email chains, am I right? Like sometimes people are just reply, sometimes they do reply all, but we end up in this email conversation, 15 emails, and you're like, what is this even about? Why should I care, right? You want that immediate insight so you understand, oh, the TLDR of this, right? Too long, didn't read, am I right? And then you have Teams. And this is my favorite usage. This is my personal favorite usage. How many are sitting and watching recordings from team meetings that you couldn't attend? Right. You spend a lot of time doing that, right? Yeah, imagine that you don't have to. Suddenly you just go with your Copilot interface and you say, what is this meeting about? Did they talk about X? Should I even care about watching this recording? That's fantastic, right?
That should be my problem.
I have like probably 10, 15 meetings a week where I don't have time to be on them. And I haven't watched a single one. Just go into Copilot and say, what is this about? Make me care. So, but of course, there's such a phenomenon called prompt engineering, because now that the world is prompt first, natural language sentence first, that means it matters how we express ourselves, right? So whether you're talking to a colleague, you're talking to your child, you're talking to someone else, it matters how much context you add. If you're talking to a technical peer, of course, you can easily talk, right? But if you're talking to someone who's not working for your business or with tech, you need to word yourself differently. So imagine now that you have this Copilot interface, this AI assistant interface. You need to be formatting yourself as a question, if it's a question. You need to add in enough context to make sure that you get what you need. And you need to state not only the what, but the how. many times you need to guide your AI assistant through the process of how are we actually doing this? How can we limit what we need, for example? Unless you want an essay of 2,000 words, limit it to say 400 words, right? Or if you actually want a diagram in there, say so. And then, of course, there are some patterns out there. If you check out Wikipedia, you will learn that there's such a phenomenon called few-shot prompting, which is what most of us are going to be using as we start to learn how to use this. And then chain of thought is very interesting. I usually think about chain of thought as a teacher and a student. So if you have a maths teacher, right, they are trying to guide you through a number of steps. If you do the same with an AI system that says, this is the way I want you to solve this problem, that's what chain of thought is. Right? Line out the steps. First, you add A to B, then you take B and divide it by C, and so on. By doing it this way, you arrive at a better outcome. And then there are various techniques for making sure that you can actually question the output, because guess what? The AI is going to guess, and it's going to hallucinate, which means that when it doesn't know the response, it's going to come up with something that seems likely. So don't trust the AI out of the box. Actually question its fact. Where do you get this from? Show me a link. Are you sure about this? What happens if I say, no, this is wrong? Will it actually persist and say, no, this is correct because of this? Or it's like, yep, my bad, right? So make sure that you think about this, that the AI isn't 100% correct all the time. It is getting better. Like in the last 6 months or so, we've seen a lot of advances, especially we've seen how links have been included in many responses. So you can actually check out and verify what you're looking at is essentially correct. Here's what it looks like in Word, right? So you're going to be used to, when you use these kind of apps that I have Copilot, on your right side, you will first have a Copilot button. So once you click that button, you will see this chat interface. This is going to be the same in Excel, in Word, in PowerPoint. And here at the very bottom, you do what you can to fill in that prompt. So here I'm writing, write me a 400-word strategy doc on how to best have cloud advocates at MVP attend MVP Summit. So this is very Microsoft branded, obviously, right? But imagine that you take this prompt, run with it, adjust it for your own company. So now you get the sense of what it can do for you. Here we're talking about scaffolding, right? Scaffold that first doc, come up with something good. What does that actually look like? Well, now we have Microsoft Word open. So we try to use this. I start typing down here. This is where I start these days, right? I don't start by typing right in my editor, but I actually start here. I'm trying to formulate my high-level strategy. I say, draft the customer proposal for building an intranet. This is great. Okay, sure. Many of us might not even draft these kind of proposals, but if we do, imagine getting this help. So we're not promise you gold, right? We're not saying this is going to be a perfect scaffold, but it's a great start. That's the message. So here we give it a few seconds to think about it. Maybe you have a sip of coffee or whatever beverage that you enjoy, and a few seconds later, you should see some kind of response. And this is not even accounting for the fact that you can mix in your own company's Word docs. So you could, at this point, do a / and say, look at this template while drafting. So you could be, so here you can see that everything that is able to write for you, right? So there's a lot of text in here, the tables in here. This is a great start, and I promise you, this will make your workflows faster. This is not perfect, but it's a great first scaffold, something that you can keep on iterating on. Now moving forwards, I didn't see many hands from you all when it comes to forms and surveys, but don't worry, if you do have that case, know that it's supported within Copilot. So instead of you just creating every single question manually, you just use a prompt, right? Just use a prompt saying, I want a survey on my presentation on 365 in Copilot, should be 15 questions. Fair enough. So I just hit generate, right? So once I hit generate, it thinks about it and it's going to draft that first scaffold of questions, different data types even, right? Multi-select, single select, add your own response kind of questions. And I can keep working on the scaffold down here. And I can say, keep these questions, add this, remove that, change the formulation. This is an iteration that takes seconds for every iteration. So just imagine how much faster you are if you indeed are working with survey creation. What about Excel? How many work with Excel at some point? All right.
Too much.
Too much, right? Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think Excel is an underrated tool, honestly, for data analysis. I know a lot of people are using big bespoke systems, but many of us are in Excel, right? Well, that's where we spend most of our time getting those insights. So just imagine that you can generate data suddenly with Excel. You can get those initial data insights or even help with performing tasks. Then you get a sense of what I'm talking about. So here we're looking at some kind of table, right? We see a few different products. We see everything from Polaroid camera, record player, fitness tracker, many things like that. And I would love to have some insight. So open my Copilot, top right, open up my Copilot, get my Copilot interface to show. And I can just fire away here. So either I can use one of these predefined tasks or one of these prompts that I think I should be using. So either use default or start typing your own thing. And if you have a few thousand rows of this, you're not going to see who's the most sold product. But just by using your sheer eye visibility here on 11 rows, you can probably deduct which one is the most sold one, right? Yeah, so the most sold product here is stainless steel water bottle of 8 units sold. Okay, so what about least sold? Right? So you can see how valuable this could be, right? Either automating your tasks or getting those data insights. And it's there at the very fingertips, right? All you need is a prompt. All you need is Copilot. Moving on. Now, this is one of the most useful things for me next to forms, right? PowerPoint, right? Generating decks. That takes time for most of us, right? We are asked to create a deck of 20 or so slides. Maybe we need to insert things in the deck. Maybe we want to change slides. Maybe we just want to know what this deck is about. Right? I'm sure there's a lot of decks in your company where you're not sure whether it's this deck or that deck, and it would be fantastic if you could just ask the deck before even opening it, right? Can you tell me if this deck is about this product or about this and that insight? So looking at the demo here, and I actually showed this demo in front of a startup crowd, just telling them, what if you can use it for a pitch deck? Many of us are not running startups. We don't create pitch decks, but we do create decks that we need to showcase for management, maybe, or maybe our colleagues. So I would say that this is still a valid demo from that aspect. So here I'm saying create a pitch deck, 15 slides, should say that it's selling soap. It's a product called Soap Opera. So I thought that was really nifty here, right? Soap Opera. Each soap features the face of a famous opera singer. So here I'm adding some context. So while adding this context, I have to wait-ish. This is usually 15, 30 seconds, and I'm sure we can make this faster. But the idea is that you should have a first scaffold that you can keep working on. And what I want here is not only text, but I want the visuals. Here you can see how you definitely can help creating a PowerPoint deck. I'm not going to show this in front of your general manager, but definitely start here. Can be really useful, right? A few nodding heads, so either you're fast asleep or you're liking what you see. So Bing, what about Bing? Well, for me, working at Microsoft, I have a million different technologies that I need to learn at all points, right? And I'm sure you're feeling that too. It's like, oh my God, I need to stay updated, right? And just imagine that you have an improved search. Instead of just doing keyword search, you're getting what you need, right? Or imagine that you're asking for different things. You're asking for text. You're asking for images, multimodal. That's what we really want, right? So just imagine a Bing demo looking like this, where I say, create a nice looking invite for a company retreat. I mean, sure, most companies have some kind of retreat, right? Coming back from summer, and we all feel we want to be motivated. Why should I even go up in the morning, right? So here it gives me a retreat invitation back, some kind of nice scaffolding text. Maybe that's a great start, but what if I want an image, right? People are not going to say, oh, here's a long text from Chris. I'm not going to read this. You know what? Retreat sounds nice, but, show me that visual. What about we all go to Brighton, right? Anyone been to Brighton? Been to the pier? Yeah. Great. So then you know what I'm talking about, right? So now it's generating an image for us that we can tuck into that nice little invite, and off it goes. There we go. Nice. And you can just change that. If you don't want it as sunset, it could be morning sun or maybe people on the pier itself. You can see already how your workflows is hopefully a bit more, you feel like, oh, this is actually okay to do because I got an AI assistant. It's like everyone has an assistant that's able to do all the heavy lifting, right? I can focus upon being smart, strategic. So here we're looking at Teams, and this is very much my favorite thing, but this is, of course, flavored by what Chris's everyday work life is like. Many meetings. How many people have many meetings per day? More than 3 to 4 hours?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Full day.
Full day, right? So many meetings that you're on, maybe so many meetings you wish you could attend. But now you can, right? So you can get insights from these team meetings, right? You can learn from meeting recordings. You will directly see what notes, what are the next actions, which actions are on you versus not on you. What did your colleagues say as they presented? Just imagine getting all of those insights. I mean, I have literally, let's see here, 120 recordings I need to look through right now to gain some insights on product feedback. And guess what? I'm not going to watch a single one. I'm just going to say, did they talk about product feedback for each and every recording using Copilot? Fantastic way to data mine, right? So what did we learn so far? We learned that our everyday workflows are going to improve, right? Things are being scaffolded for us. We will be able to get that data insight. AI is your best friend. No more writer's cramp, right? Because you just send your ideas to it and say, do your best or do your worst. And no more reading long emails, right? We don't want that. We don't want to go through 10 emails we're being sent back and forth. We want the TLDR. Too long, didn't read. But this is all great. This is what people are getting out of the box with Copilot already. So why should we build plugins? Well, not everything is in here, right? Which means there's still a lot of company data, still a lot of bespoke things we need to make sense for our business. And that's why many of us are here today. So we need ways to extend all of this goodness that you see in Teams and PowerPoint. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we can just add to it? And you can. You can. There are different types of plugins. Plugins for Bing, plugins for Teams. We will see dedicated talks towards that. Power Platform, low-code platform where you can build connectors. Connectors are wrappers around API, and you can just drop them anywhere like it's Lego pieces. So, and there's also graph connectors, and we'll see a talk about that as well. So this is a good evening, right? I'm just setting the high-level context here of what is Copilot, what can I use it for? But we can be even better here, right? We can work with this. So there are different types of plugins. There's ChatGPT plugins, there's team message extensions, and there's Microsoft Power Platform connectors. The plugins are great, right? Because they can fetch information on behalf of our users. So imagine that you're going towards the Graph API, or you're going towards some bespoke traveling API, or whatever API, right? Maybe it's dad jokes API. My point is you can fetch data that's not there. It's either there in your company's repository, or it's there externally, and you can marry the two and show a great user experience. So the user can then, once the plugin is installed and set up, the user doesn't need to go to a dashboard anymore, right? They can just go to their Copilot prompt and say, what do you know about our company's sales, right? We were talking about this early on. A lot of bespoke applications that you're using today at your company is maybe a mobile app, a desktop app, maybe a Power BI dashboard. And instead of you going to all of these various applications, you just stay in one place, right? You stay in that text input where you say, what do you know about sales? Can you show me this? Can you show me that? Right? One place. So what does this mean as a developer? Well, there are a few concepts that we need to keep track of, but how many are developers in the room? And with most applications that you're trying to ship, right? You need a sense of an API, most likely, we always have that. You need some kind of specification, some kind of configuration file, especially if with APIs, you need something that follows a schema, something open API. You also need some kind of manifest, a manifest file that says this is what you're going to get, right? And once you have that, with the API, what you're saying is that you're exposing endpoints, right? And this could be internal data within Copilot or external data completely. And you also get an API specification, so you can tell the user, these are the endpoints that are being supported. These are the things that you can do. And then lastly, the manifest, I will deep dive into that so you can see what that one contains. So theoretically, this is a piece of cake, right? For most of us who've built API before, shouldn't be a big lift for you all. This is more like, how do we do it in Copilot? So create the API, that's your first step. Your second step is to document your API. And most of you who work with these, maybe if you're a .NET developer, you got something like Swagger already integrated. It's one line of code. Same thing if you're a Python developer or Node.js. We have libraries that does these things for us. And then creating the manifest file, that's hopefully just a very short exercise that you can use some kind of sample manifest that adjusts to your needs. And then you need to test it locally. And the good news is that you can test it with port forwarding, for example. And then you have the final step of deploying and publish. But there are some things to consider as you publish, because we want to make sure that at all times the end user has a great experience. So if your API is overloaded, we might actually disable your plugin. So these are things that you need to keep track of. But fairly simple API is just showing listings, different properties. This is as simple as an API could be, right? This is not trying to do some kind of external reach towards wherever or even a graph API, but this gets the idea across, hopefully. Simple API. And then you need a way to document your API. But again, this could be auto-generated if you're using frameworks that support something like Swagger and API. This is just to show you this is a different way of describing your API, so you know what's there. Once you have those 2 out of 3 components, the very last component is the manifest file. And this is where I need to call out some things, because this matters to Copilot. Because what you describe here is what Copilot is going to go by when the end user starts using your plugin. So if you have described that this is a plugin for finding properties, as soon as your end user is going to type properties, this is where it tries to identify a suitable API, and it's going to find your plugin. So spend some time here. Spend some time writing a description here that makes sense for the AI model. And here you can also see how we are exposing various endpoints, filling in some contact information and other things. That's nice, right? What about security, right? Many of us are working with APIs that needs to be secured. What are different options? Well, you could have is user authenticated false, which means that it's a completely open API. That makes sense sometimes. But most of the times you want some kind of login, at which point you probably want to generate some kind of token, right? So you can use existing libraries if you're using Node.js to just create that, unique token. And then you need to check it somehow. You probably need better code than this, but I think I get the point across that you need to check it versus this unique value. And once you've done that, you need to go back into your manifest file and say, well, this is the type of authentication I'm using, some kind of bearer authentication. But yeah, I believe we're supporting 3 of different models of authentication. So hopefully you find something that makes sense for you. But you will definitely hear about this aspect, I think, from speakers later today. And this is what I mentioned before. Think about this. Think about high availability. So you don't want a plugin where you have 1 million people asking your API for things and you don't have rate limiting or you are missing aspects of your API, which means that this is going to become a bad experience for your end user. You need a way to control. You need a way to measure what kind of traffic is going towards your plugin, because we want to make sure as Microsoft that the end user has a great experience. So please make sure you're handling throttling and rate limiting, things like that. And make sure you secure your endpoints with TLS. So what about testing and debugging, right? What is the general developer experience with these things? So you built your API, you created your manifest file, what now? Well, if you are building a plugin here for Bing, which is the example, you need Bing to have a way to have access to your files. So you need to set up cores, right? You need to say it's okay for someone coming from Bing to do these requests. So we're allowing Bing to have access. And you also, and this is just during development, you make sure that your local service is exposed to the internet. So some kind of port forwarding, you get an external URL that can be hit from the outside. And then you need to be side loading your plugin, which essentially means that you need to sign in to Copilot with your Microsoft account. There's a plugin menu in there. So you can just see the list of plugins and then test the plugin. So once you go through all these steps, make sure that your plugin is working properly. This is the page that you're going to find when you go in here and try to publish it. So yeah, you need to give it some alias, point out where the manifest file is located on the internet, and then select the appropriate authentication and a few other things, including the access token, or here you see the different authentication styles. No authentication, bearer, like I showed you, and lastly about OAuth, because we support that as well. I suspect many of you are using that. So that's all I had today for Keynote, but what I wanted to summarize is to say, a lot of you haven't used Copilot M365, neither has your users. So if you're building these plugins, make sure that you improve the experience for your end user. Think about prompt engineering. Maybe there's something that you need to write to the users to make sure that they get the most out of using Copilot as is. I mentioned a little bit about plugin development, the broader strokes. But there's more, of course. There are 3 other speakers tonight that will deep dive through these topics that I've just brushed through the surface of. We have Graph Connectors by Lee over here. He's going to talk about Graph Connectors right after me. And then we have Teams Message Extension by Paul. And lastly, at the end of the evening, Ijas will take us home by talking about unleashing your business data and how you can be building custom graph connectors. Not your run-of-the-mill connectors, but more custom. So hopefully now you feel like you have the context you need for Copilot, why use it, and how we can keep on extending it. So thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Any questions?
Makes perfect sense or no sense? It's one of the two. Yes.
That's great. Have you got any information on Copilot in Microsoft Fabric at all?
Had some.
Slightly out the swim lane.
Yeah, we do have a session coming up. It's online. It's on the 4th of June. It's actually by the product team itself. I can give you the details after the event's finished. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
But I do think the Fabric Copilot, I think you need to buy the license or something. There's something behind it. I'm not quite sure.
People only at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question
Yes.
about data. If I am using any data, because as you said, I can pull out the India data from various other sources. If it's the business data, how exactly I had to protect that data? It's supposed to be a question. Maybe I will get some answer in the business data, unless you have business data answer.
Yeah, I think it's what you said. There's definitely going to be some insights in some future talks, but I think my general answer on data, because it's scary to enable Copilot. And the main reason is that we need data labels on most of our content, right? We need to protect it. We need to say what's sensitive, what's less sensitive. So labels definitely play a part here, but this is something that maybe as a developers, we don't do so much, but on an organizational standpoint, we need to think about governance, right? For our data. And I'm sure as part, when you're building this, you're able to extract these labels and say, I'm able to get this data or that data depending on protection level. But yes, so there's definitely more context to come later tonight, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to go through this one with the, how can we use the same model as the Azure authentication, so apply to your individual item, individual data. So we'll be going through that session.
Yes.
Yes, I got one question. Today it was released GPT 4.0. Is it Microsoft? I've seen Azure. You can test GPT from today. These kind of facilities. Is Microsoft 365 kind of adapted to already or not yet to talk through? For example, not to write to Copilot, but talk basically to respond on to your voice.
I think that's a great question. I mean, 365 is in preview, I think, and there are very few people who have access as we speak. So it would surprise me a lot if it's not there within 6 months. I don't think it's there yet because, you know, what you said, multimodal GPT-4 is very new, but it is definitely one of the first products who's gonna get it. I can say that much at least.
Can I add to that? So you can dictate your prompts. I sometimes use that because sometimes writing out a prompt can take quite a bit of thought. And I find that if you just talk it out,
Yes. Yeah.
it's much smoother to formulate a longer prompt with your voice, because you know how to formulate a conversation where, and then when you get the response back, it doesn't send your audio. It's just the local operating systems translating your voice, and then when it responds, you can continue to use that audio-based input. I do find myself using that sometimes just for speed. Instead of typing out like 2 paragraphs of prompt, I just talk it out and do it a lot quicker.
Yes.
I think also just to add to that, I think the lead time from GPT-4 Turbo, from it being released in November to then it being integrated into Copilot Microsoft 365 was April. So I don't know if you could expect the same sort of lead time for GPT.
I mean, I would say this: we got Microsoft Build coming up on the 22nd, so don't be surprised if we are announcing things. I can't say anything officially, but definitely keep track of this product. Yes, so then I think Lee is up next, right? Oh, sorry, more hands.
Just one question, Lee. Is it possible to, if I'm using already ChatGPT and I'm using also Azure for ChatGPT, somehow migrate from ChatGPT to Azure? Because if I want to use GPT from Azure, I need to access through different, like web link. And sometimes it's confusing if you've got work already done on ChatGPT. In order to carry on with your work, you need to like copy paste or do. Is it possible to find easier way to kind of to link your email address to Azure ChatGPT to just ordinary ChatGPT?
So are you looking for a one-off migration or? Yeah, okay. I have to take that question with me. It's a great one. So essentially your question is, if I have ChatGPT today, I've done a lot of work, there's a lot of history, how can I easily migrate that when moving to Azure? Okay, I'll take that question with me for sure. I don't have the answer.
Will you send a video around afterwards? Because I'm going to miss the end bit and it looks good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we did record. The session is recorded. Excellent.
All right, thanks so much. And I think Lee, you're up next, right?
Sure.
There you are. Hey, there we go.
Start now, or there's no like countdown time or anything. Okay, so hello everyone. My name's Lee Ford. I'm a development lead at a company called Extensibility in the UK, and today I'm going to talk about Microsoft 365 with Copilot and Graph Connectors. So you may find me calling it M365 Copilot. You may be calling it Copilot for M365, or I might just call it Copilot, but it's the same thing. So if you're familiar with Copilot in M365, you log into Microsoft365.com and click on the Copilot button or search. It's effectively that what I'm talking about, or I think more and more people are using it inside of Teams. So if you're inside of Teams, the big Copilot button on the left-hand rail, and that's effectively what I'm talking about today. So how we can extend the sort of capabilities of it using graph connectors. So Does the slides work? There we go. So quick bit about myself. So I'm based in Birmingham, so I don't have a Brummy accent, but I am based in Birmingham. And you can follow me on the socials. And I pretty much work exclusively in the Microsoft world from a development capacity. Yeah, that's me. So the agenda. So we've got the what. So what is a graph connector, and how does it work, and why use it inside of Copilot. So what's the point of getting some data and put it in a graph connector if you can't really use it? So obviously that's where Copilot comes in to facilitate that. And then we'll have time for a demo, and hopefully, if we've got time to do it right, we'll have time for a quick code walkthrough and just go through sort of how it all is all stitched together. So you've seen this on Chris's slide a minute ago, but this I nicked this from Microsoft Learn, but effectively this kind of shows you how Copilot is based obviously on a large language model. So it's the smallest square. So Copilot is almost a wrapper around that. Sort of use your natural language, expose it into Microsoft apps, be able to ask a question, and obviously it uses the LLM to formulate a response. And obviously that's great for your Microsoft data, for your Microsoft applications, but what it's not necessarily great for is if you want to get some data from an external source or your own business data that you own. Copilot has no visibility of that. And obviously, I think adding that in does make a big difference to the usability of it. You don't necessarily want users going, oh, Copilot's great if I want to ask it something about a Word document or an email, but I want to know about some sales figures from 6 months ago that aren't in a Word doc or in a spreadsheet. It's very difficult to get that data out and make it usable within Copilot. So there's sort of two ways to get around that. So the first one, plugins, which was mentioned previously, and those are one way to do it. And that's more as the sort of the arrow indicates up. Those are more for skills based. So can you do this for me? Can you get this for me? Can you change that? Can you change this? You're kind of triggering Copilot to actually do actions on your behalf using skills. And then you've got graph connectors, which are more about extending the knowledge, extending the data that's available to Copilot, but not necessarily allowing you to do actions upon it directly. So you can't kind of modify the data. It's more sort of structured or unstructured data actually in graph connectors, but it is kind of static as the way it's kind of ingested. It's not. It's almost like read-only, I guess. So, quick plugins versus graph connectors. They're both obviously available in Copilot. Plugins, like I say, are used for skills. So, can you do something for me? Can you get something for me? Can you change this? Whereas graph connectors are more, here's a load of data. I want to be able to get to it from within Copilot. Now, the graph connectors can use unstructured data, so you can just give it a load of quote unquote rubbish, and you kind of format it a little bit. Ultimately, you can put 5 million items of unstructured data into effectively a bucket and let Copilot see it and ask it questions about it, and it's pretty good at kind of giving you a good answer. There are some differences between graph connectors and data when it comes to data to plugins. So obviously, message extension plugins and Copilot Studio plugins, they do require the data to be structured. So it needs to have some structure to it. You can't just throw it effectively a load of files that you found or a load of JSON documents and go sort it out for me. They all support millions of items. The plugins do support more than connectors, but to be honest with you, if you've got more than 5 million items in one connection, you do kind of wonder what you're trying to get out of it, really. And like I said, the key thing here is the message extension plugins, which Paul's going to talk about. They do allow you to do actions or skills. They're not just tell me about this. It's tell me about this and do something with it. So connectors. That's obviously what we're going to talk about in this session. We're not talking about plugins, so you have to wait for Paul for that one. So as I said, Graph only includes data from your Microsoft tenant. So what's in your SharePoint sites, what's in your OneDrive, what can you see inside of Teams. Recap that meeting, or can you find this file for me? Can you summarize this email? All that stuff's in Graph, and obviously when you're asking Copilot to do those things in the background. Effectively, it's using Graph to get that data out. It's sort of nothing new there, really. So obviously connectors, they allow you to bring your external data in. So say you've got some structured or unstructured data, and you think, oh, actually, it'd be good if we could ask Copilot about that to kind of perform some actions or kind of summarize the data in a certain way that you could do yourself, but it involved downloading a load of data, putting in some spreadsheets, and messing about with it to get the data that you want. It'd be great if you could just ask it. Or you could ask it, summarize my emails. This can be this data that's in the connectors can be surfaced via Microsoft Search as well as Copilot. So even though we're kind of Copilot centric today, you can use this same functionality in Microsoft Search and Context IQ and other sort of technologies. So when you're using a graph connector, you're not querying the quote unquote live data. So if let's say you've got a database and you're getting the data out of a database and you put it into a graph connector and the database changes, the graph connector won't automatically change. You have to handle that. So it is effectively a copy of the data at that point in time that you ingested the data. If you want to keep them in sync or keep them up to date, that's something you have to do yourself. And I'll go into that a little bit later on in the demo. Okay, types of connectors. So we've got two types. First one is the built-in off-the-shelf provided by Microsoft or third party. So Salesforce.com, for example, you don't have to build it. Develop it, it's already built. You just go to the Graph Connector gallery, download, or effectively fill in the details, click connect, and it kind of downloads the data and puts it into Graph for you. You don't really have to do much with it. Like I said, there's no code required. In my honest opinion, it sometimes works great, sometimes it doesn't. So for example, Salesforce, we found, yes, the data's there, but it's kind of a bit unstructured and a bit kind of messy. So asking it a kind of a specific question, like, can you do this, or can you get this data out, or can you summarize this order or something like that, it struggles to work it out because the data is kind of a bit messy, because obviously a lot of these connectors, these graph connectors, aren't necessarily built with Copilot in mind. They're built long before Copilot came out, because graph connectors have been around longer than Copilot has. So just bear in mind that you think, oh, it's a graph connector for that, great, okay, job done. Might not be job done, just bear that in mind. So the second type are custom graph connectors. This is where you're getting data from an external source, like built-in ones, but ultimately it's not a built-in connector that you can kind of just fill in the details and away you go. You have to kind of do a bit more work yourself. So obviously you can get the data from anywhere, so no matter where the data is, ultimately, as long as you can get to the data in your application and put it into Graph, you're golden. Now it does require you to write, obviously, the connector code, which I'll kind of go through, and it's not hundreds of lines of code, don't worry. But you do also need to host the code. So obviously you can't just kind of, similar, unlike a built-in connector where you can kind of just set it up and I'm going to spit on a load of stuff in Azure or whatever. Obviously you've got to host this here. Now, in my case, I'm just using Azure Functions just because it's easy, but you can host it wherever you want. You can run it in whatever language you want, and you can use whatever data you want. Ultimately, it's just some Graph API calls at the back in the back end, really. And like I said previously, you do need to ensure that your data is kept up to date. So you can import the data, but if that data is going to change or is likely to change, you need to make sure that you're capturing those changes and then updating your Graph connector with the latest data. So then when you're doing something in Copilot, you know that it's actually got sort of live data as such. Obviously, so there is a delay. So if you ingest something into Graph, it can take a few minutes for it to actually appear in the results and be up to date. So it's not true live, but it's as close as you're going to get, really. And obviously things like plugins are probably more for live data that you really has to be like to the second live, where you want to query an API directly. That's where plugins probably come in anyway. This is more so data that may change but isn't going to change. It doesn't matter if it's 15 minutes out of date. Okay, so consumer connector is easy in theory. So I'd say it can be searched in many parts of the M365 stack, and obviously the way it works is obviously when you've got the data in a graph connector, obviously it's just a pile of data. You have to ask for that data. You have to try and there's not a page where you click and it just shows you all the data. You have to actually request the data. So whether that's a Microsoft Search or in Copilot, you need to say, oh, I'm looking for this order number, or can you tell me details about this customer, or whatever it is. You've got to actually query that data directly. It doesn't just kind of appear in a file. So here's an example. Can you tell me who orders the most coffee? And it's gone off and it's grabbed that data out of the graph connector, and that's Copilot coming back and summarizing the data. It's also weirdly found some information from the web about coffee in America is latte, according to a study by the Specialty Coffee Association. That's for that. So there's 3 steps to connect your external data, and I'll go through each one. So first one is creating a connector. Then we create a schema, and then we ingest the items into that. So the connector itself is sort of the framework. This is like, the data is going to be, whatever type of data you've got. Let's say it's a knowledge base. The connector is going to be knowledge base connector. Then the schema, and that's not necessarily the content of the knowledge base, because obviously that could be different. It might be like, the timestamp is going to be attached to this property, and the title is going to be attached to this property. It's more the kind of the schema of the outline, almost like the metadata really of the item. The actual content of the item can be more open, and that's where the unstructured data support comes in really, where you can as long as you've got, everything's got a timestamp, everything's got a title and a link to the data, it doesn't matter what the data is, you can kind of just either ingest it as HTML or text, effectively just the sort of the raw data. So first step is creating a connector. So you literally do a post. I'm using the beta endpoint here, just kind of get the latest and greatest, but you can also use the 1.0. So effectively we're doing a post request to Graph to say, create a new connection. I'm calling it sales orders, and obviously I'm giving it a name and a description as well. And you can, if you need to change it, you can effectively do an additional post request with the same ID, and it will update it. You don't kind of, once you've set it, you can change it. That's what I'm trying to say. You do have to include an ID, a name, and a description. There are some other optional things like how the results are rendered in the graph connector. So if you go into say something like Microsoft Search and you search for the some content, default is almost like a Bing or Google result. You've got the title of the page, and then like a quick blurb about whatever the content is, but it doesn't then have maybe like a nice thumbnail, or you want to render some additional bits of content. You can do that when you set the connector. I won't go into that here because that's kind of wait for it on the page, but that's effectively some of the additional config that you can add to a connector. But this is sort of the bare minimum to get you up and running. Now you need to create a schema. Like I say, this isn't necessarily what the content is containing. It's more just general kind of metadata. So you've got things like the title and the URL, which are kind of mandatory. And then you've got things like I've added like order number, just so it's easily searchable within a sort of when you're asking Copilot to look for it. It's got a bit more context. Obviously, the order number may be embedded in sort of the content of the file or the bit the data that you're importing, but it won't necessarily be exposed at this level. So when you're trying to search for it, it kind of draws Copilot towards the bit that you're trying to sort of get a hit on. There's only certain types of metadata. I'm calling it metadata. I don't know. I think it's property is the actual term that you can use. So you've got strings and doubles and date time stamps, and I think you can have a string collection, but you can't have effectively a string array. But you can't have like a number collection, for example. You are kind of limited to certain data types. And once you've created the schema, then you effectively then are creating the items, indexing the items inside of that. So important to know, you can create a graph batch request, but you just have to ingest each item individually, and you use the connection ID of the connection and then the ID of the item. So each time you do a put for each item that you want to do in each item, can have its own ACL. So if you want to say, oh yeah, well, I only want CEOs to be able to access this item, but there's other items in the same connector that I want to allow everyone to see, you can do that. So the ACL is per item level, it's not at per connector level. So you can kind of carve up the data as you see fit. So in this case, I've just said, grant everyone access to this item. You could say, deny everyone to this item, but except grant people within this Active Directory group access to the item. So you can kind of like carve up how you want the items to be exposed. And that's kind of, like I say, it's up to you to decide that it's not going to work out for you. Similar, like if you think of something like Copilot, you say, well, you don't have access to that file, so we're not going to bring it up in any search results when we're asking Copilot, can you find a Word doc on this? If you don't have access to that Word doc in SharePoint, it's not going to bring it through. Effectively, what we're trying to do there with the ACL is the same thing. Now, the properties, again, those are the metadata that we had on the previous slide about the schema. So we're giving it a title, we're giving it a URL, and an order number. I could add some additional properties if I wanted to, and then these could then be searched upon. One thing to mention is you want to define as many as you can to obviously widen the search. So if you're searching for something, you've got a load of different values about something like, oh, can you find me something that's got the highest order total of all our orders, or what's the highest order for March? It's going to be a lot easier if you've got that order total as a property on the item, rather than if it's embedded inside the content. It's a lot more difficult for it to actually be exposed. So, like I say, the content itself is either text or HTML. So in this case, I've just put order details and some text, and all the value just is order details, just for I didn't want the slide to be massive, but ultimately this is where you'd put, whatever the order details were. You'd be like, oh yeah, so and so ordered 5 of whatever at X amount of pounds. That's effectively what you're doing here. So, like I said previously with the built-in connectors, some of them don't work that great with Copilot in my experience. You may want to kind of like build your own. So if you are building your own, these are the things that I would say you just need to be aware of. And this isn't exhaustive. There are, if you go on the Microsoft Learn page, there's even more recommendations. But ultimately, similar to when people say, oh, make sure you're asking Copilot or the AI asking it the right way, and make sure you kind of being assertive and kind of as much description as possible. It's kind of similar in a way that when you build your connector, you've kind of got to guide it a little bit and make it the most obvious choice when Copilot's trying to find what it's looking for. So first thing is using semantic labels. So in this case, the label kind of matches the name of the property. But if in your case you didn't, you would have, so if let's say the title was called something else, you could match the data to the label. So the labels are fixed. So title, URL, I think icon URL is another one. There's about 5 or 6 that are semantic labels. Now they can be matched against any property. In this case, I've just matched them against the property name just to keep it kind of uniform. But in a lot of cases, you may have, the URL might be a custom property that's another property name, and you think, oh, actually, I want a semantic label. I want that to match against URL when people are searching for it. You can apply the same semantic label as well to multiple properties. So if you've got multiple properties and you want them to, so if you search, oh yeah, can you find me the title of something, and you have title, but you also have something that's down, it's kind of similar to title, but it's technically different. You could also use that as a semantic label. And that way, it's kind of exposing the data in more ways. This one's important, and this is also important on plugins as well. You've kind of got to tell Copilot what it is, what it's used for, and what effectively what data it's going to get back. So if you just call it connector 1, and you say, oh, can you find me some sales data from March or something, if it's called connector 1 and there's no description, it's not going to know what it's for. It's not going to know why it's going to use it. It's not going to necessarily choose that as an avenue to go and get the data. You've got to be as descriptive as possible in using the connector. So call it something like I think I called it sales orders, and this is used for getting sales orders. So then when you say, oh, can you find the sales order? It goes, oh yeah, I've got a connector called sales orders. That makes sense. Don't try and use sort of relevant terms, not generic ones. One thing that you have to do is when you set up a connector, you need to make sure that you've enabled inline results. So otherwise, you can set up the connector, you ingest some items, you think, oh yeah, everything's great. And like, what's nothing coming through? I'm asking Copilot, it's not coming back with any data. You have to go into your admin center, go into the search settings, and there'll be an option for inline results. You just need to make sure the connector's got a tick box. Otherwise, your data will be there and it's ingested, and you think, okay, maybe I'll leave it a day, leave it 2, still not getting any hits. Just check that setting, because if that's unticked, then you will not get any data. So how do connectors work with Copilot? So kind of gone through how we set up a connector, but how do you use the connector? So first thing is data is pushed or pulled from a source to the connector application. So I'm calling connector application, that's my code, let's say. So data goes from the API, I've got it here, it could be a JSON file, it could be whatever you want it to be. And the data is then transformed into the correct format and schema. So that's about matching the data with things like the URL and the title and the whatever the kind of the properties that you've defined for your item. It has to have, like on the couple of slides ago where you have the schema, you need to transform your data so it matches that schema. And then you can just ingest it into Graph. You can just fire it over and just send it all in, and you can sort of do it pretty damn quick, to be honest with you. So kind of ingest the data, and then at that point it's just simply, once you've ticked that box, the inline results, then you just ask Graph, I'm going to go into Copilot and enable it or anything like that, or you just use Copilot and you just say, look, I'm looking for something, can you find it for me? And if you've kind of done all the work up to this point, then it will just work, and you don't really have to think about it. You don't have to go into oh yeah, well I need to go into a separate app to ask for that data, or a separate Copilot. No, you just go into Copilot and just ask it, and it will work in theory. So it wouldn't be a Microsoft presentation without licensing considerations. So connectors are licensed, and it's based on the items that you have, or amount of items that you want to ingest. So connectors themselves are kind of not license based, but the items that you store inside of them are. So things like M365 E5, I think also Office 365 E5, M365 Copilot, they increase the amount of items that you can ingest. Okay, so I think a few slides ago it was up to 5 million items per connector. So obviously, if you've got a lot of licenses, you might hit 5 million, probably not. But if you did need 5 million items, you can also purchase them. So I think for each M365 Copilot license and E5 license, I think you get 500 items. But if you think, oh, actually, we've got quite a few users, but we need millions of items to be able to index, then obviously you then effectively you can buy add-ons to the Graph connector. So the quota is shared across connectors, so it's not items per connector. So if you've got, say, a quota of 10,000, you can have 2 connectors of 5,000, and there's no problem. Or you can have it split up however you want, really. But they are shared. But you can't have 5 million item quota, 5 million in each. It's shared across. Okay, so an example solution. So I'll get to the demo in a minute, but ultimately what we've got here is we've got a Cosmos database, and that's effectively, in this sample, a sales database. So sales database contains orders. So imagine it's got a front end, and users are using it to enter sales opportunities, whatever. And in this case, every time an order is processed, maybe from a website, it gets put into Cosmos DB. And then every time the sales order is updated or created, we then effectively have a trigger set on the function app to go, oh, the date's changed in Cosmos. I've now got a new item being created or changed. We need to do something with it. So it then triggers the Azure function to then create or update the item in Graph. So someone goes onto a website, orders something, that gets put into Cosmos DB, that triggers a function app, and then that data then gets put into Graph. And then let's say the order gets shipped, and someone in the back end goes, oh, I've shipped that order. Again, same thing happens. Cosmos DB takes that order and goes, oh yeah, the status is now shipped. Let's update the function app gets triggered, and then again Graph gets updated, and all the while Building Copilot can obviously just be asking, what's the status of this order? What's the status of that order? And obviously, hopefully, there's not too much of a delay between the data in Cosmos being updated and being in Graph. So I think that's all there is on that. Time for a demo. I don't know if I am duplicating. I am duplicating, aren't I? Cool. Awesome. Okay. So if it's too small, let me know and I can zoom in. All good? You zoomed in a bit? Zoomed in? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So this is just in Postman. So what I've got here is I've got a connection called sales orders. After the idea of orders, and here's my description, information about sales orders sold by us. Okay. And what I'm doing here is I'm just running this effectively a local function that goes and gets the connection data from Graph. So fingers crossed it works. It does. Okay. I always worry about public Wi-Fi if it's actually going to let my code through or not. But okay, so what it's gone to Graph, it's got the connection details, it's got the description, and it's also got the ingested items count. So we know that there's currently 99 items in this connector. Okay, and obviously it's enabled for search, and that's what Copilot uses for getting the data out. So if you can get the data in Microsoft Search, you can get it in Copilot. I haven't added any search settings or activity settings. And what I've done is I've authorized the application to be able to access the data. Now I've also pulled through the quota. So in my tenant, I have 394 items remaining before I hit that quota. So I haven't got that many licenses. So like I say, once that hits 0, you won't be able to ingest anymore. You'll hit an error when you try and ingest it into Graph. And finally, I've got the schema that is currently running in my connector. Now you can change the schema down the road, but what you can't do is you can't remove properties. So if you added a property and you think, actually, we don't want that property anymore, you can't just take it out because there's items that already have that property in. So you have to delete the connector and re-import all the data, which is fun, but it is what it is. So just bear that in mind. Try and get your schema right if you can the first time before you ingest millions of records and then go, oh, actually, isn't that? We need to change this property name or get rid of this property. Yeah, bad times. This is the schema. So I've got a title, and I'm using the semantic label for title. Is an exact match required? No. And then I'm just going to go through each one by one, but we've got the URL, and the URL is important for when you get the result back from Copilot or Search. You want to be able to click through and look at the full kind of context of that data, because ultimately this is almost like a search result. Really, it gives you a summary of what the data is, much like when you go on Google or Bing. You search for something. You don't have the whole content on the search result. You have to click through and actually read the content. That's effectively what we're doing here. So I'm also servicing the order number, the customer name, the order total, the order date, and the order items. And the order items is a string collection. So for each item that's in the order, we have an individual string to kind of outline what was that order. Okay. One thing I'm going to quickly do now is I've got I can generate some items. This might not be instant, so we might have to give this a few minutes, but what we'll do is we'll generate a load of bulk orders, upload them into Cosmos, then they should then process back into Graph, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, in a few minutes, that data will appear. We'll see. So cross our fingers. So it's going to create a load of orders. Okay. So if we keep an eye on that one, 14589, hopefully at some point by the end of the demo, that will be available for a search in Copilot. So now let's actually show you it in Copilot. So let's just bring up Microsoft. Okay, so this is one thing. So Microsoft Search is effectively the data was exposed in Microsoft Search. I'm selling cough. Let me just match it here. I think I've got some. See any orders that got matcher. Okay, so we can see all these items from the Graph Connector all appearing. They're all showing matcher T. Okay, and you can keep scrolling through. There's multiple results. Not the greatest experience. Like I say, you can kind of customize it a little bit. You can add a result type to maybe add a license picture or a little table or something. I haven't done that for the demo, sorry, but it kind of shows you the data's there in search. And then if we now do a new chat, I'll just show you the power of it. Obviously, is the Copilot. So you can say, "Can you show me the last order by?" I think it's not called Alexander. Cross our fingers that Copilot's find an order. Last order placed by Alexander was order 18 on May the 3rd. Cut them out. Okay, and then you can view the order. I don't know why it says an external link was removed, but okay, wasn't doing that yesterday. But ultimately, I have the reference. So this is find the last order from a couple of weeks ago. It's sort of outline what's in that, and then the search result. This is the URL from the label of when we set up the schema. That then you can click through onto that, and hopefully, if my code's running, it is. That then brings through. This is the external sales system, for argument's sake. So if there's a reward application, I could go in here and edit the data, and then this would then effectively follow that flow of updating the database, updating the Graph Connector. And then the data in Copilot would be updated the same information. But obviously you can kind of ask it a few more questions, like what are the orders that Alexander placed? Maybe we'll find out. Okay, and then obviously it will go off and find the things. Orders the most almond milk. Let's find out, hopefully anyway. Effectively, it's just taking this very basic data, which obviously for this scenario, it's not a particularly complicated example, but it's just showing you how you can kind of get some external data and put it into a connector. So we've got time to show the code, I think. Doing all right for time, are we? Yeah, we're doing all right. Okay, cool. So if we quickly go back to Postman, I'm just going to look at the connection. And it had 99 items before. Do we have any more? Oh, yeah, okay. We're still at 99. Let's give it a few minutes. Anyway, what I'll do is I will quickly go through the code and kind of outline what we've got. So, yeah, big enough? See? We're good? All right. So, what I've done is I've created just a config item, and in there I've just included an external connection. So we call it connector, but in the SDK it's called an external connection. So you've got a connection inside of a connector, and then obviously I've also then outlined what the schema is, and this will look familiar to what we got back in Postman. So I've got the ID of the I'm passing it through as a environmental variable, the connection ID, so I can run multiple connectors, but ultimately that's the ID of the connector. And then we've got the name and the description. Pretty straightforward. And then we've got for schema, item schema, we've got the title, like I say, the URL, the order number. And this is just basically how you define the schema up front. You can kind of add aliases, so you can say, even though we call it an order number, people might go, oh, you can give me the order ID, or can you give me the order? It kind of just helps Copilot find it a bit better when you're searching for something. And you can say, is it retrievable? Is it searchable? Maybe some of them you go, actually, we want to have that metadata, but we don't want people to be able to search upon it. So you kind of tweak those settings in the schema. So that's all the schema defined and the connection. And then effectively what we have is bit of code. Again, like I say, this runs in Azure Functions, so I can just put it in Azure and just run it and have a Copilot, just have it update the graph connector whenever I need it to be done. It's kind of not sitting on my machine. So to create a connection, I just create a graph client, and then I actually check to see if there's already an external connection. If there's no external connection, then I create one. Pretty straightforward, yeah. And then I go and check if there's a schema. If there is a schema and it equals the same, it hasn't changed, don't do anything with it. Schema's already there, already exists, not changed. Otherwise, update the schema to the new type of schema. That will take upwards of 15 minutes. So if you update schema, don't expect it to be instant. It will take a few minutes, similar to ingesting items. It doesn't just happen. And that's creating a connection. Like I say, it's not even 50 lines of code. It's pretty straightforward. You could probably shorten it as well. And then for ingesting items into graph, I've basically got a trigger. So when something gets added to the orders container in the sales database, effectively we trigger this bit of code. So again, we set up a graph connection. And then for each document, we just loop through each document and just effectively pick out parts of the document. So I've kind of find the type as a sales order. So I've got an interface called sales order where I've just kind of highlighted how it looks in Cosmos DB. It's going to have these properties and there's these types of properties. So then when a new order gets processed, I can then go through it and know, oh yeah, there is going to be an ID for the document, and there is going to be an order number, there is going to be a customer name. We can kind of effectively know what to put where. And effectively, I create an external item. I'm just granting everyone access to everything because I'm crazy, but you may want to like scope it down. But ultimately, we create the ID of the document. Sorry, the ID of the item is the same as the ID in Cosmos DB. It doesn't make sense to change it. And then we just populate it with title and URL. And with string collection, you've got to have this weird property where it tells you it's a collection string inside the properties. It's not technically a property, but it has to sit there. And then underneath that, you can then specify basically a string array of each individual item. And then for the content, this is where I'll kind of just summary almost of the order, what the order number is, what's in the order, how much it was, what date it was, and what the items included. And then you just create it in Graph, and that's it. That's pretty much it. I don't know if those items, last thing, just see if those items have been created. Well, we're still at 99, let's see. Oh, 119, okay, cool. So those ones that we created, I don't know however long ago, are now here. So I just take one of those, maybe it works, we'll find out. If I go back to here, you tell me about the ID. Let's see. So I used order ID rather than order number just to see if it actually works. Yes, so that's now, a few minutes ago we imported it, and now it's here. If I click on the link, does it open it on the external system? It does. And that's it for the demo. If I just bring up my slides again. Final thing to say is thank you. I'll put it on GitHub, so if you want to have a look at the code, see it at your own leisure, rather than squinting briefly, then scan the QR code and hopefully I'll take you to the GitHub and then you can have a look and see what you think. That's it.
To fetch the data from, for example, Word, Excel, Teams, PowerPoint.
So this is where you're consuming the data, or this is where you're getting the data from? where you're getting the data from.
Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of it, obviously, if it's already in M365 things, then in theory we will already get the data because it will know about your Word documents and whatever. But ultimately, if it's not exposed to Copilot, then you can go and get whatever data you want. Like I say, you're not limited to. I mean, I've just done some data in Cosmos DB, but ultimately, wherever your data is, as long as you can get that data and you can link to it, because ultimately, what connector is there to do is not necessarily contain the whole data. It's there to be linked to where the data is. So if you've got, like I say, an external CRM system or a database, or whatever it is that you have as your external system, this is there to effectively say, here's the summary of the data that I found based on your search, and then the link to click through and actually get to the actual. So in your case, you might have an index of all the documents that you've got on in Word or whatever it is, or wherever your data is, and then you effectively create you're linking back to it. If you sort of it's almost like a search engine, really, any search engine.
So what I mean is, like, can we, when we installing this under Microsoft tools, are we able to
get this data?
automatically add this data from any Microsoft tools to the database, and then from database we get the information out? So that's the problem which we have at the moment.
I'm not sure, to be honest. Yeah, we can catch up on that. I'm not sure, to be honest. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, from an admin perspective,
Yes.
what's the best way to monitor how often this, let's say this setup has been utilized? Do we do the traffic monitoring from Postman, or is there a way we can do it in Microsoft that we can see how often it is?
So like a reporting how often the connector is using.
Appear in the reports and the search.
Yeah, I've not actually checked. I'd have to check that. So the search, I think the if anywhere, it'll be the search reports, because ultimately it's not a Copilot specific thing. I think if you go into the search dashboard, in there you can see where the results, like what connectors are being used in the results. So I think you can, yes.
This is an ROI question.
Yeah, you don't want to expose the data as like anyone actually using it. Like, what's the actual? Yeah. I think you can. I'll have a look actually in a second, see if I can find that for you.
The restrictions on the data, if you want to restrict who can see it.
Yes.
You mentioned that it was you had everyone, or you can specify specific people. Is this more of a monitor tool than the message one that we're going to look at later on? Because, say for argument's sake, if you're extracting information from a database and it's specific people to see specific orders, for example,
yes,
you need to transfer across everyone's name in that.
Yeah, this is. So I know what you're saying is if you've got like really complicated ACL set up on your data, wherever it's coming from, you need to try and replicate that in the ingest. I think this is probably more either only certain people can use all of it, or it's open to everyone. So you're like, we're importing this connector, but really the people that are going to use this connector are these groups of people. I think even though it's done on a per item level, I think, like you said, it'd be quite tricky if you go, these customers, these groups have access to, and these customers, it'd be quite difficult to maintain that. Obviously, it's technically possible, but I think it is more, like you say, a more broader tool that the wider group, company can use. Whereas plugin, you can effectively manage who can use the plugins on a per user basis. But obviously, inside a plugin, you can't then say, but you can only access this as part of the plugin. Once you go access the plugin, you can access all of it, if you see what I mean.
I think you can control who get access to the
skills,
the graph connector. I'm pretty sure there's there's a setting in the admin center for the graph data. If you wanted to constrain it to a group of users,
no, you can. On my plugins. So I've got
similarly. So plugins, like Teams extensions, you can control who gets the plugin by setting up a policy in your Teams admin center.
That's right.
So you can control how that plugin is rolled out on that level.
But you can't access like the data inside the plugin. So you can't say like, oh yeah, everyone gets the plugin, but only so and so can ask that question inside the plugin. It's like, if you have the plugin, you have the plugin.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll show you how that gets
Yeah.
chosen.
It's a tricky thing to solve, I think, because you're trying to replicate ACLs that you might have on an external system within Copilot.
Yeah, like if it was a company that did sales and procurement, for example, you could give the sales and procurement team access to that data, but not anyone else access. So you could do the ACL based on who's within that group. Not
Yes.
Yeah, I think the grouping is probably the way forward to easily manage based on individual data. So if the data you are getting from your database has some sorts of flags, like if this data is confidential, only exposed to these two groups.
Yeah, you'd have to set up some logic. Yeah, and one thing you can do is you can update the items ACL when you update the items. So if you want to, even if the item itself hasn't changed, but you want to, like, say, reprocess the data, go, actually, all these shouldn't be exposed to everyone. You can obviously re-import that data with the new ACL applied, and it will then obviously hide it from people that shouldn't have access to it. Okay.
You wouldn't use this for data aggregation, would you? Is that's what the plugins? Like if you wanted to know the total sales of vanilla syrup or something.
You can try. I've not had great success with it because it tells me to go away and use Power BI. I'll try it again. Let's see. But I thought that would be a really good idea. And it was like, I think it's that you're asking too much of me. Is effectively what I got told.
Isn't that the difference between the connector and the plugin? Like with a plugin, you can ask structured questions, aggregation questions.
Plugin is a bit more flexible.
It's not covered by my demo.
Probably if you have a skills defined by the plugin to do the aggregation, and then probably would be possible, I guess. Any function is there, which is say, okay, this plugin does segregation, and if you provide this parameter, and then you can go and do that.
Let's have a look, see what it comes back with. What are you going to tell me? I can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just do another way. Can you? How much coffee we have sold this month? It can do it sometimes where you say, oh, can you show me all the orders for like Lucy? And it will list like 6 orders for them. But you won't be asking it, oh yeah, can you show me how much coffee we sell on a monthly basis? It goes, no, thank you.
It's more document oriented, isn't it? It's more like Elasticsearch or something like that.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's more about getting a few results. It will get a few results effectively. There must be some sort of logic where it's like, if it includes more than 10 search results, because ultimately they are search results, it kind of goes, no, that's too many data for me to like aggregate, like say, or summarize.
You have the Power BI Copilot.
That's what I was saying.
Exactly, you do.
Exactly, because it will give you maybe the more search result.
Yeah.
I've seen in Power BI, which is also something. So that you can get that.
So if I say, it's like, show me the orders for Luke.
Power BI into your Office 365.
Yeah, exactly. So it will summarize like so many orders. It will go, oh, here's the last 6 orders that Lucy's made. But if you want to like show me all the orders Lucy's ever made, which might be like 20, 100, 300, it struggles under that sort of load, which is annoying actually, I think. Maybe they'll improve it, I don't know. Okay, so it's gone off and listed a few.
It's not aggregated.
It's not aggregated it. But if I go, oh, what's the... maybe it comes back and tells me. Okay, all right. We're getting there. Slowly. Okay, so...
That is adding now.
Yeah, it's adding, yeah. Well, admittedly, I can add it myself, but, you know, not in my head anyway. So yeah. Any more questions? Okay, cool. Okay, no worries.
Thank you. I think we're going to go on a break now and
Right. Hello, everybody. So, welcome to my talk on extending team message extensions. So, taking your message extensions and bringing them into Copilot and what you would need to do to achieve that. I just want to take a quick pulse of the room. Who's worked with Teams Toolkit? Yeah, we got two. So I'll probably do a little. In my demo, I'll do a little primer on Teams Toolkit. So Teams Message Extensions is Teams Toolkit is a toolkit that is installed into Visual Studio Code that helps you scaffold out a Teams application, right? So it allows you to then build and write the sort of code that you need to do what you want, and then expose that within Teams. And I'll show you that in the demo, because the demo sample that I've created for you is based on Teams Toolkit and then Teams Message Extensions. I'll just go through that. Just a quick one about me. So I'm Paul Bullock. I've been an MVP for 4 years now, so close to my 5th year. Dual MVP, so I'm in the development and apps and services space. That will get changed later because they've recategorized us all. But yes, so and currently I'm working at Avanade, so I'm a modern workplace architect doing various things there. I've been fortunate to be a part of the early EAP programs within Avanade. So I've been using Copilot since July last year. So it gives me the sort of slightly further ahead view of how it was used and things like that. So not too much on the extensibility side in Avanade myself. So what I have been doing is, on top of that knowledge, I've been building up my own personal knowledge through the MVP work and working with the various product groups and things like that to keep right on top of how everything is being built, so that when the extensions all skyrocket off, then I can help educate people on, and like sales, on how to take that forward. So I'm not going to drain this out too much, because I sort of took the nice diagram that you guys have shown around extensibility and just sort of changed it a little bit. So as we've talked about before, we've got graph connectors. So that's bringing your data from external sources into the search system so that you can perform those queries. So obviously we've done that in an awesome demo on that already, so I'm not going to go through that. And the focus of my talk is around the team message extension plugins. So this, for example, uses the bot framework and will surface your plugin through, at the moment, Outlook and Teams. So through those interfaces. And then as the other types of extensibility, you've got the Power Platform, where you've got what was PWA, has now been renamed to Copilot Studio, so you can leverage all the Power Platform components and build all those solutions and bring those in, bring all your connectors. A lot of that knowledge, I think some of the thinking behind a lot of these groupings of technologies. So graph connectors it's been around for a while, so it means there's got a lot of knowledge in the industry about how to use these things and bring that in. Obviously, you need to do certain things for Copilot. That's fine. And again, with PWA, which I haven't personally touched too much in. Again, that's not necessarily a new technology. So there will be lots of skills in the industry already. Again, with Teams Message Extensions, again, it's not the newest technology, but it's certainly certainly could be extended to including Copilot as well. So it means that we're not learning everything from scratch, or at least for certain groups of skills and people. It's more about bringing those sort of different ways and different use cases into Copilot. So I'm not going to drain this too much because we've already covered this. So what I want to talk about is we've got Teams message extensions. So what you would need to do to bring them into Copilot. So first things is there's different types of message extensions. So they're action-based, there's search-based message extensions. You have to use a specific type of message extension to bring them in. Again, if you wanted to build a search-based message extension, Teams Toolkit has the scaffolding you need to sort of bring that through. It's a full tool set, so you can take an app from its title and descriptions. It will scaffold all things like all the Azure components you would need to host your bot. It would also scaffold out the app It would also provide some sample, depending on which pathway you go through, some sample code around, say, bringing in like an NPM repository as an external API, that kind of thing. So you can get all of that as part of Teams Toolkit. I'm really not giving it justice because that is a pretty awesome tool on many levels. But it's certainly worth, if you're going down the development space, if you're building Teams extensions, Teams Toolkit is definitely the way to go with that. The other things that you would need as well to work with, sadly this one, you need a tenant. And it's not just a production tenant, you would need a developer tenant of some kind where you can work on these extensions. I've encountered a few situations where you may have Copilot on your production tenant, but your admins may not want you to sideload your Teams message extensions into like a production tenant. So ideally, if you can, get hold of another tenant and install Copilot on, buy Copilot for it. There is a small cost implication, there's a reasonable cost implication to that. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that down at all. So you can get a tenant that you can buy, like an E3 or E5 tenant, and then you can license it for Copilot. It would be for the year, but you would need that in order to sort of at least test the Copilot integration between your Teams message extension before you sort of roll it out to sort of a production. I don't want to go too much into licensing because there are different combinations that will help you with that, and hopefully that gets a bit easier towards the latter end of the year where we can get hold of those perhaps from Microsoft. The other thing that we would need to do as well, so Teams app comes with a manifest, and Chris sort of touched on that in the beginning around sort of Teams apps. So there'll be some changes that would be needed, potentially some architectural changes in the back end of your APIs, just to make things a bit smoother and to expand on a few sort of inputs to the API. And yeah, okay. So I've been working on a sample for the community because part of my MVP stuff is I'm very heavily involved with the PMP community, building samples for, I'm an owner of script samples, for example. I've been running that for a number of years. So I've expanded to, so I don't just like run these things. I do occasionally want to dabble in different technologies and stuff. So this is part of my dabbling because I've had the opportunity to get hold of some of these technologies to be able to sort of build examples of how you can integrate into Copilot. So what I've done is because a lot of my points later on rely on me to reference an example. So what I have done is built an app. Not particularly, it's not production grade, so don't, you look at the code, you'd be like, nah. But it at least gets the job done. And then you can sort of take that. I will be releasing it, I haven't released it yet, but I'll be releasing it soon, and it'll appear on adoption.microsoft.com. So I will publish that. I got a few little things, a few little hints from Leah earlier. I think I might do a little bit of polishing here and there. So that's always the trouble with samples, is you end up like going, oh, just add that and just add that, and before you know it, you haven't released anything in like 6 months because you've created this monolith that then you've just lost the point of why you're doing it. Anyway, getting back to this, so I've created a very straightforward app. So I've got my Teams. I've got my Teams app. So I based it on the scenario. So my data source is the service health and the announcements that are made in the message center within 365. So that's my data source. I thought it was quite an easy one, and people can relate to see what the results would look like and things like that. So I've created this app that will essentially talk to a function. So that's its pretend API. So there's an API there where I am essentially the app will query certain things about the message center data. So this will either be the announcements or the service health, and then return that result to the app and then present that to the user. I've additionally made a few modifications to, so this is all in my Azure functions. I use PowerShell for the majority of this, just for speed of get the example out of there, but I might switch to C# later. What it does is I've got a data cache. So I use SharePoint as a SharePoint list as a data caching. And what I have done is I've ring-fenced this off from Copilot, so it doesn't accidentally, leak into my results set that I'm coming back. So the point of that is so I can get the information faster, because I found that communicating from the Azure Functions to Health Service was a little bit on the slow side, and I was hitting some sort of timeout issues with my app. So I've got this caching in place. I've turned off search, so the way you can stop Copilot from referencing a SharePoint site's data. Turn search off on the site, and then you won't get it in your results. It's not in the semantic index. It's not anywhere like that. And then what I've done instead is I've grabbed the service health announcement data. I've got a quick Azure automation script that then just keeps that data fresh. It only runs once a day at 9 o'clock. But it gives me that sort of data that I can play with when I'm writing this. So then what I would then need to do is take that app and make a few tweaks to it in order to bring it through to Copilot. So initially, when you take a Teams message extension app, it will work mostly in Copilot, because there's a property that you provide. You can search on it, and then it returns some results to it. But maybe you want to make it more specific. Maybe you want to make it so that you want to query something very specific within the health service, all the announcements data, and return those results. In terms of results, I use the adaptive card framework to present that back. That's the default pattern. Everybody familiar with adaptive cards? Cool. If not, I'll show you what they look like later. They're basically pre-canned blobs of JSON, which present out these nice little cards. Once you see one, you probably think, I've probably interacted with an adaptive card output at some point in the talk, in your past. Right, so we've got that sort of framework for the sample. So then I can talk about how I'm bringing this into Copilot. So this has been mentioned a couple of times. App descriptions are super important. So Lee's already touched on the fact that if you've got like app 1, it's not going to cut the mustard. So or Bob's app, or just a one-liner to say it. You need to almost, how can I put it? You need to almost sell the app to the Copilot sort of LM. So when it chooses your app to produce results, it knows what it does, what value it's bringing, how it can basically provide the information that you to the user's prompt as part of that. So if you imagine, like for example, the room full of people, right, and you just want to target a specific person, and you don't really, I've not met all of you, and that's okay. But maybe I want to bring some sort of highlight someone individually. I'm gonna pick Lee because I know Lee a little bit, so I know his name, I know what he does, and things like that. So I've got that kind of name, I've got that description of what he does, and things like that. And that's kind of how it works. Is you need to set your app description up in a way where you can essentially get Copilot to find your app and use it, or at least understand what it does in order to bring its data in. So what Microsoft have done very recently with the Teams app manifest, back in, I think it was 12th of April, just went GA, the new version of the Teams app manifest went live, where you can now separate the descriptions, and they've added a new section about semantic descriptions. So when you're describing to Copilot what the app does, it can sometimes get a bit not necessarily human friendly, right? So, and you end up looking at these apps, a user would read these app descriptions and going, I'm not Copilot, why would I use this thing? So there's now a clear separation between the app description for a human user, so you get that nice like, informational page, and then what you want the LM to do with the data in your app. And there's different levels as well. There's like the app level description, the command level description, and then the parameters. So a command would be like, go and query this API, and the parameters would be, I've got like an ID or a workload in my example, or I just want to do a free text search. The other thing that has been added recently as well are sample prompts. So I've not actually seen this operational yet. So they've added this new section to the app manifest, and I've actually populated it, but I've not actually seen it being worked. But the great documentation is supposed to provide that kind of nicer, when you activate your plugin, it provides this sort of first run experience, so you can see what the options are when you run it. And things like plugin library and suggestions will come into play as well. So at least you can provide your users with a hint going, okay, well, I've got this plugin. Well, what do I say, right? And sometimes that can be a barrier to entry, but if you see an example on the UI, then that would be super cool, and then that would help. That So just remove this box. It's a little bit annoying. So if you don't populate semantic descriptions, not the end of the world. The app one, the human app ones would then default back to that. So yeah. So I think some of I have populated this in my demo code. I'm teasing on the edge whether it's actually being used, but I'll be interested to see because it's not actually obvious from a Copilot point of view. It's actually using it yet, so I might be a bit early. I might have got the app manifest before the actual product has caught up with the release. Nevertheless, at least it gives you a sort of grounding of what you may need to do in the future. So command parameters. So with Teams message extension, you get like one parameter. You can do like text search or ID, whatever, and it will bring back a result. But Copilot is best used when it has more than 3. They're using perhaps 3 up to a maximum of 5 parameters. So you can do like a free text search of like, say, I want to search for everything with the word pages in the message center, see what SharePoint pages, what's being changed or what's broken. Or you can go, well, actually, I've got this message center ID. I want to search for that. Or workload. So I say we'll bring it back everything from SharePoint. Then, so you got these sort of different parameters that you can put in. So I'll show you in the sort of code walkthrough a bit later about that. Yeah, so consider what I have found as well. Consider properties that sort of target certain sort of data types. I find that Copilot returns a slightly stronger result when you say, "Oh, give me like stock numbers or IDs and things like that," and in a certain format, bring back. It doesn't have to be. What I have found is you don't have to have it in. You don't have to have it in like an ID. Sometimes mixed like it's like alphanumeric. Or what I have done is described like examples of what they are, so it can be recognised, so it populates it. What you must consider though is if you're doing all these, like adding all these command parameters, you've got 3 to 5. Your API may not be, if you've already written a Teams message extension, your API may not have that or support that. So you potentially need to expand your API. So when I mentioned about your architectural changes in the back, so you need to be able to support potentially between 3 and 5 additional parameters. What would that give you? And also and include that tolerance. So because the LLM may not choose to populate that parameter, so make sure you handle that carefully. So when the orchestrator looks at your plugin and goes, okay, well the prompt has mentioned an ID, I'll use that. I'll show you an example of what that looks like in a minute. So just to show you what this might look like this isn't something you code. The LLM is taking care of this for you, which is, if I'm honest, pretty awesome actually. I didn't have to do that much coding to get an operational app, if I'm honest. So if my example prompt would be, is there any health issues with SharePoint in the message center? It will detect the workload SharePoint and populate that parameter of the app. You can mention the app. That also helps return results as well. And again with Search ID, if you say, "Oh, show me," I just made the number up, so you can't Google that or anything. Then it will detect that and populate a different parameter. based on that. What I'll do is I'll go into debugging mode in my demo. And I'll show you how the prompts can translate back to the property, so you can see how it picks it up. And sometimes it doesn't. So it really just depends on the prompt. And another thing to mention, there's a couple of little things I bumped into. Sorry, that's gone off the screen a little bit. And the StreamYard thing is in the way again.
Just select to hide it.
Oh, right, yeah. Ability to read that. Okay, so two things. What you can do is when you're writing Copilot plugins, you can it's a very lightweight developer mode. So what you do is you just pass this into your prompt, dash developer on, and it will activate this sort of developer mode where you can enter in a prompt at the top here. And if, for example, it goes, nah, I've got nothing for you, what could have happened is something may have happened between the prompt and your app or maybe your app itself has caused it to break. You know, there's something that didn't work out, you got an error in your API, or whatever. So what it does do is it tells you, you know, what sequence of it tried when it hits your app. So it's detected that you've got your plugin enabled. It has found your plugin and is using that. Then it's chosen to execute that function within your plugin. So I've got one called Search Message Center, for example. And then what it's done is it's tried at least a couple of times here to do it. So in my case, and the reason why I've got that sort of weird SharePoint architecture in the back end is because my plugin was too slow. So there's a 6 second I found. Hit beyond 6 seconds. In fact, the documentation is kind of a bit, there's two values. There's one says 6 and one says 10. So from observation, it's 6. Because 10 is never been, I've never got as far as 10, so it always did come up with it. So when it does, so if you ever have this problem, and your API is too slow, you'll see a response of 0, and it will obviously say fail. Yeah, this is how useful the development mode is. So you know that something's gone wrong, your app's not responding in a timely form, and then that's brought that back. And then what it's done is it's tried again, and it's been successful. But I think by that point, it's not made it into the response. So it says your app's still alive, but it's too slow. Right, do you know what? Probably too much talking right now, so let me show you things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spin up. I'll stick it in debug mode. Should have done this earlier. Just going to activate that. The background. So while that's spinning up away, I want to show you Teams Toolkit. So I assume that you're all familiar with Visual Studio Code, or at least seen it in some form. So what you've got is you've got an extension that you can do for Teams Toolkit. I've obviously got it installed, so I won't do it. So I'll click on that. So it's a plugin you can get for Visual Studio Code, where you can create your Teams apps, as you can see by the little video, which is super cool. You go through when you're creating a project, it'll go through a little wizard in the different types, and then what it will do is, depending on what you want, it will scaffold out all the code for you, which is super cool. I'm quite a fan of Teams, if I'm honest. And if you're not interested in doing it in Visual Studio Code, but you have Visual Studio, there is an equivalent plugin. Oops. Oh, yes, because my app. So there's an equivalent plugin in Visual Studio as well. So I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of, and let me zoom in a little bit because it's not. Let me just close that. So hopefully, is that big enough for everybody? Right, awesome. So what Teams Toolkit? Sorry. Yeah, sure. Sorry. I'll minimize this to try and keep as much of the viewport open. Right. Okay. That's still debugging. That's good. So majority of this is based on a scaffolding project in Teams Toolkit. There's one way you can build a search-based message extension. And what that will do is it'll provision out like a Teams app manifest. It'll provision out things like a basic sort of Azure backend. So when you provision a Teams Toolkit solution, it will include things like, and this is based on the bot framework. So it will deploy a bot, it'll deploy a web app, deploy your sort of service principals into AD, and it'll configure all that for you and deploy it all out for you. So you pretty much have to go, here's my subscription, have fun, and then it will just go, and then you'll have your entire app ready to go. And at the point of when it's finished scaffolding, you can just go run, and it will just work. And it's so that's Teams Toolkit in a nutshell. So I haven't done anything on the sort of Azure side. I do need to finish the sample before I can publish it. But essentially, it does give you your app manifest and then your sort of source code for this. So in terms of your sort of source code for this, you because the adaptive cards, let's start from adaptive cards on the top over here. So I have created a couple of my own, but essentially you do get a sort of default one. What does an adaptive card look like? So it's like this sort of JSON blob of, sorry, it's Visual Studio doing this new sort of wrappy thing, which I don't overly like at last. So it gives you like it's defined in JSON so that you can sort of design out your adaptive card. And there's a cool tool that I love to use is there's a preview that's installed on this. I think it's a separate extension. Let me just move this to this, where you can preview your adaptive card. So I've got a bunch of dummy data in here. Some results that I've cached just so I can see what the adaptive card looks like. And this is what I'm expecting. So it means that I can tweak my, how I want to present it and things like that. I don't actually have to, fire it off to a service and return the results. Am I happy with results? No, I don't. I'm not happy with the results. I have to do it again. So you can make the changes in real time and not have to worry about that, which I quite like actually. It's really quick. And if you're even in situations where you're not online as well, it can still work. The other things that you do have, so there's some sort of basic scaffolding for the app. I've not made any modifications to this, so Teams Scaffolding will present all this out for you, generate this all for you, and then you've got this sort of search app, which I have tweaked. Let's skip all that. So it's just telling you what you want to include in your, in this particular class. So that it can do what it needs to. So what I have done is I've got this fairly horrible-ish block of code where, I was talking about those sort of parameters. Do you know what? I'm going to take a slight step back and talk about the app manifest. So this is an example of the app manifest. This is the absolute latest version that I can get hold of. You can actually use a preview one. I find that's not worth, I haven't had a reason to use it because I'm not entirely convinced that the Teams product would render out the result of that. So in some cases, I just use the absolute latest on that. So you fill out things like, your developer information, which Chris was mentioning earlier, some iconography as well. So I've got this not in that case, but certainly in this case where I just scribbled out on an iPad with an iPad pencil. So you can see it's more like a drawing. Just to highlight your app in some way. And then you've got the description, which I'm just going to wrap a minute. So I've done a really rich description about the app. So I've got this, you've got this basic information, the short description, and then you can go to town with. It's actually marked down. You can format it in a nice way, and I'll show you what it looks like when it renders out to Teams. But, I've described it as an app that lets you know how the user status the M365 service. And what the changes are, okay, why choose it. And it's a great way of finding out the flow of work status, upcoming changes might need to know about, and things like that. So I sort of given it a really rich description of what it does, what the benefits are, even some examples, more for the end user than the LLM, but the LLM can consider that as well. In terms of the commands, so I've just got one. I just want to search the thing and bring back results. As you can see here, I've got two different descriptions. So I've got search the message center announcements in the admin center, and then I've got like a more of a sort of LLM-based description, say I want to search for service health, incidents, advisories, announcements, things like that, in order to sort of bring that back. At least it gives it more context for the LLM to then choose that command from the options. I've only got one, but if I have more, then it would give it more. I've done the same with the properties. So search query is like a generic, text search. There's nothing fancy about it. And then I've got things like the workload, the IDs, and the search types. I mentioned about sample prompts at the bottom. So what you can do is define, if you want to provide some examples of how users can get started with your app in Copilot, then you can say, what's the health status of SharePoint, what features coming with SharePoint workload and stuff like that. So coming back to here, so I've described these sort of properties here. So what it can do is because the LLM can choose these to populate these and return these back, you can then process the queries. So the queries that come back from the LLM, the parameters, and you can say, well, I've got a search ID, it's populated the workload and so forth. I then go and call my Azure function. It's a really simple piece of code here. I'm just using Axios, which is a library for calling external APIs, and then I render out the results in the UI through this code here. It just loops through all the results and displays the adaptive cards or previews the adaptive cards. So I'm trying to keep it as close to simple as I can, but prove the point. So what this looks like in Teams, if it's all loaded properly. So I'm just going to go to my normal user. As a Teams message extension, what that means is it appears down here. It's a bit small actually, I might just zoom in a little bit. You can click on the plus sign. You can then see my app, so I'm running it in local mode. You can see obviously the little icons, it's my app and stuff like that. I can click on it, and then I can search. I'm going to search for Copilot because there might be something in the message center that's related to Copilot. And if it all works well, it returns a list of results. If it all works well, it returns a list of results. Hey, whew. Yeah, a bit of a teaser there. So what I have done is I've made a little trick in the code where if I'm returning, there's two things I'm searching for. There's service health and there's announcements through the message center. So what I have done is I put a little icon emoji actually in the code so that I can. It's more for testing than it is for. It looks all right actually. I might keep it. It's more for ensuring that I'm getting the results that I'm on the different types. So these are announcements that come back. It's not returning any service health issues because there's a small bug in my Azure function that I discovered late last night and hadn't had a chance to fix. So they are in there. It's not in this particular instance. It's not loading. Okay, so what does that look like for Copilot? So hopefully this all works as expected. I have noticed that Microsoft do these incremental changes to Copilot every now and then. And one of the big things, or it's one of the things that I've noticed today, this thing here, I wasn't there yesterday. So there's been a new UI enhancement in the way that you potentially upload results, which is cool. I've not played with it. When you're looking at your plugins, what you'll see is this icon over here. I hope you can see that in the corner over here. You've got plugins. And then what it'll do is it'll pop up with a selector. So when Lee had the unfortunate of getting like web content and the graph connector stuff, I can turn that off. I might not want that. So yeah. But what you can then do is choose. So I've got the local mode. It's in developer mode at the moment, so it's automatically select that. So and if it's not, you can toggle it. So it's really easy to switch it. It means that what that means is when you're doing your prompts, you're triggering off you're sort of telling Copilot you can use that app as a data source. So if I go, now that's enabled. So if I go, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slightly, don't know if I can get away with this in such a big interface, but I want to see if I can get terminal window. Maybe not. I don't think it's going to. I'm just going to do that and just slide back. So. Okay, cool. So I've got a little piece of in my code. I've got a little logger which is telling me what the parameters are at the bottom here. Sorry, this is a bit that I'm looking at. You know, when I search for that, when I searched for the message extension in Teams, I typed in Copilot. It went off and called my API and found some results. So what I want to do is just overlay this, so we can just watch that as it's making prompts, see how it responds. Hopefully that's not too confusing to everybody. Right. Okay. Cool. That looks almost survivable. So if I go, what's the latest in the message center? I don't know. Does everybody find whenever you're talking to like an LM, you put in please, will you return these results? I find it feels like against the grain to not put please, will you go and find this? Give me some results. So as you can see here, sorry. I can see here it's gone away. It's called my backend API, which is like a little cache of the message center just for speed. It's returned the results, so it's turned things like the service announcements for this. Obviously, it's doing an announcement search. So it gives you the sort of like list of what's going on within the message center, some of the latest announcements that are going on. And when you hover over like these little one symbols, if you can see that, yeah, do you know what? There's been some changes. Okay, slightly broken. So there is, that was working yesterday. I've got the screenshots, but yeah, you can see the sort of adaptive card experience that's coming on. This announcement, you've got an ID, you can see where it applies to and what the dates are and things like that. I'm just going to grab that. So what you can then do is then dive into, give me more information on this ID in the message center. That'll go away. As you can see on the bottom here, you should see as it's doing its search, it will pop up. Copilot has called my API. It's doing a search. The actual function is doing its thing to get the data, and then it's returning that one result back to Copilot. And now it's producing out the response to that for me. Some really nice things about this: it will take the descriptive features of the adaptive card and actually interpret some of this as well. So in some cases, telling me off, perhaps I've got a bug in my opportunity, unfortunate details of the guidance Keynote are not included in the search results. Thank you for highlighting that. But again, it's driving a lot of the response from these cards, as you can see here. So this is just an example of like one API you could use. There's no limit really. You can design your own API, you can design the interface, and people can then call the responses back. Now, Lee did talk about ACT, and I haven't actually got that in my demo, but what I was thinking of doing is what you can do is you can put on action buttons within your adaptive card. You click on it, brings up a dialogue experience, and then you can do whatever. So what I was thinking of doing as perhaps an extension to this sample is add the ACT so that you can follow the announcement, or in some cases, if it's a service health incident, let me see if I can get that to return. So the idea was produce the act to have these buttons to potentially follow health issues. So if you've got like an incident going on, to like a widget's broken in SharePoint or something like that, then you can have the act button. It will call an API, and then perhaps you'll have a service in the background that will ping you periodically and give you frequent updates. You don't necessarily have to use Copilot for getting those updates. Copilot is not a proactive experience; it's a reactive. So it won't automatically go and do stuff for you. You have to, prompt and so forth for it to do things. Yeah. So yeah, it has picked up the any health issues. So here's an example of a health issue that's come back. You can see this sort of cards if you want, and if I targeted a specific one, then this will do that. And one other thing you can do as well is if you want to check the results, then you can see what data sources was used for each of these. So I think if you click on these, it doesn't actually. It's the numbers. If you click on the numbers, it will bring up the cards, but those don't have so helpful. If you have any sort of weird things and you don't think it's your code, use the thumbs down. Most of the feedback to Microsoft on Copilot's functionality, reliability, all that kind of stuff. If you've got some doubts that it's not your code, use the thumb down. So it'll go to an engineering team at Microsoft, and they'll investigate it. Not necessarily investigate your code, but investigate the actual Copilot response. Perhaps it did something you didn't expect, or things like that. So occasionally that has cropped up. Not nowadays, but certainly in the earlier days, it sort of came up with it. So I think that's mostly it for the demo. While I'm in this space, has anybody got any questions around sort of Teams message extensions or anything like that? There you go for it.
Just wondering if does he use OpenAI function calling API behind the scene? It looks like it does use some.
I'm not. It's actually quite a dumb. It's a PowerShell script, and all it does is it uses PnP PowerShell to query the message center and return back a JSON model result.
When the Copilot, I'm not talking about the API. Your API.
Okay.
So you give some input, and then he determining from the natural language, okay, here are the parameters I wanted to collect based on what you define in the manifest, and then constructing that and finding your relevant function within your API, and then passing those parameters.
Yeah, so I think where the LLM kicks in is when you get the results, and it's then presenting those results in a specific way. So, for example, I mean, we've seen the adaptive cards. So really, my Teams message extension is just returning this adaptive card, right? So what the LLM's doing there onwards is it's taking that information and providing these little mini summaries. So saying here, like, say 1% of Google users may experience a degraded functionality. The issue is unresolved. So it's found the unresolved, like green thing or red thing, and I've gone there, and also when it was started. I could actually ask it to expand on that and say, can you include the ID as well, so I can then trace it back or whatever. So you can ask those additional questions. So I think that's where the LLM kicks in, and it's sort of giving you that kind of summary. You can do all the kind of other things as well, saying, hey, give me this in French, or speak Klingon or whatever.
If I may add to that response, Paul.
Yep.
I think you did a great response, but I think what you were asking for is the parsing of the user's input, right? So yes, I would say the LLM has this capability already to say, you need to call this function with this and that parameter, and it's actually extracting that information from the user's prompt. This is not something that you as a developer need to focus on, but rather build the plugin.
No, I totally didn't. I didn't write any sort of fancy coding for interpretation of the prompt. So, for example, here, if I've got this, you might see this in this is the point of having this stream at the bottom, was the LLM was choosing fragments of my prompt to include in your API. So, for example, when I specified an ID, it detected that and populated that for me. I didn't write that.
Yeah. That is
so. This is beyond my capability.
As you mentioned, specified these in your manifest file as a parameters.
So yeah, so I've got search functionality. I have got examples in
Yeah.
the manifest. So in here, I have given. In fact, this is what is slightly convincing me that semantic description is working. Is I've given some fake examples of formats of what it looks like in this field. Yeah, and it's doing it all for me. I didn't code that. You know, the LLM is detecting this and populating that, firing off to my app will fire off to the API, return the results, and then the LLM is then interpreting the responses as you see here, which is great because on a sort of coding level, I didn't actually have to do that much to get this working. Okay, I've got a convoluted backend, you know, caching and SharePoint, whatever. Ignore that. But you know, if you call an API, return the results in a specific format, you know, with adaptive cards, I think is one of the prerequisites. Then the LLM then takes over and presents those accordingly. Cool. Is there any other? Go for it. Got two. Can I do ladies first? Thank you. Good one.
So the only plugins that you use, it was Teams toolkit, or
Yes. Yeah. So
I use the Copilot, GitHub Copilot, because I saw
Copilot Studio.
The GitHub Studio.
So Copilot Studio it will appear as, I think it appear, to be fair, I'm a little bit vague on Copilot Studio because it crosses over into the Power Platform space, but I believe it does appear, you know, once you create your plugin, you'll have that as an option there, and I think you have to publish it, don't you?
Yeah, it's effectively a different way.
No, but in your coding, in the back end, you had the Copilot, GitHub Copilot as well, and Copilot Chat, I guess. Did you use only Teams, or have you used the Copilot?
I don't just use one Copilot. I rock about 3 Copilots, and then every normal day. So I do have Copilot. As you can see here, I was trying to solve some particular issues last night. This is really helpful when you're like developing at like 11 p.m. or something, and you're like, oh, just give me the answer, help me out.
It doesn't rely on it. I'm saying the code doesn't rely obviously on Copilot.
The code is not relying on that.
Correct. No. So GitHub Copilot is like support. It's like having a mate who's going to back you up. It's not going to go in and take over your app or anything. It's going to go, hey, you know what? If you're writing some code, it will work out what you'll do. This is crazy intuitive. It'll work out what you're doing, and then it will suggest the next block of code you're about to write based on what you've currently done. And also, you can do things like, I know we're going beyond the M365 Copilot, but you can put comments in your code, and it will suggest that code block for you. As a first step, it might not be right. Obviously, AI generated material, you need to vet it, but yeah.
No, my question was specifically about the beginning when you mentioned that with Teams, you generate all the code automatically.
Oh, right.
That's
Sorry.
exactly the part which Copilot also does. So you give the description to GitHub Copilot, and it's automatically generate code for you as well.
So GitHub Copilot doesn't generate it's not part of that generation. That's all Teams Toolkit. It doesn't interact with my GitHub Copilot. So what GitHub Copilot is doing is, if I'm writing a block of code, I'm going to just hide this a minute. Sorry, now I'm taking your session time. If you're writing a block of code here, I'm not going to do it because it'll probably be an example or not. If you're writing some code here, for example, then let me see if I can come up with an example. So as you can see here, I've got like a repeating pattern. Okay, not the sexiest code in the world, sorry about that. But you've got this repeating pattern. But if I decided to add a 5th parameter, then I could go, case, I go search blob. Give it a couple of seconds, hopefully. And look at that, right? That's not autocorrect, that's GitHub Copilot helping write out the next parameter. So I just saved like a few minutes right now, and that's really cool. But in terms of creating the app, okay, I did get GitHub Copilot to help me here and there, but it doesn't actually. It's not a necessity to create these apps.
The Copilot Chat also generated.
Yeah, you can say, you can open the chat and going, oh, can you give me a block of code to do this? Yeah, so it's really, really cool. But it is separately licensed. It's not part of it's part of your GitHub. Copilot license? Pro? I've got Pro.
Or enterprise or team. Yeah, it's a paid.
Convince GitHub to give me
Is it
for free.
But you don't have to be a company. You can do it as a personal.
Yeah. If your company buys, GitHub Enterprise or something, and you can buy the license through them, and then you can get it that way as well. But yeah, there's a few ways you can GitHub. Do that. Right.
So, question, quick clarification. You needed an E3, E5 license to develop and deploy this plugin.
So the prerequisite is to get a Teams message extension. I think you just need a Teams license. You don't need anything more than that. In order to develop with Copilot, you need a Copilot license, which may, because Copilot licenses require. So I think it's like a M365 E3 E5. I think it's expanded to Office 365 E3 E5, and then you've got the business plans as well. I think it's business premium. So you need one of those to satisfy Copilot's prerequisites. So that's where the cost will build. It's not with the actual extension itself, because you don't have to use Teams message extensions for Copilot. You could just use it for Teams. It's not. The message extension little thing in the corner is just one of its many capabilities. But if you want to expand it into Copilot, you will need a Copilot license, and you also need to license your developers as well. Because it's your production tenant. For clear sort of developer purposes, I've always used like dev, test, prod. So dev, prod in my case, cost down personally. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I will just quickly rattle on here, and then we'll just wrap up. Yeah, so just a quick recap. So yeah, it needs to be a search-based message extension for you to use it in Copilot. Describe that very carefully in the descriptions. It does influence your results, so it took a bit of tweaking for me to get that output. And again, watch out for the timeouts. That always caught me out. If your API is too slow or you're building something, watch out for build. I'll be keeping on. I'll probably have to rewrite my sample actually by the end of build, because I'll release something cool and be like, okay, I want to use that, or I want to expand on it. I will share this slide. I haven't got a link to it at the moment, but I will share it later. So some learning resources. MS Learn is littered with some really good resources on learning. So things like your message extensions, how to build them in a high quality state. I've got a blog about Copilot on my website, pkbullet.com. It's got a blog on there about Copilot resources and AI, so it doesn't cover development of all sorts when it was announced. You've got the adoption gallery for samples. Always find them useful if you want to get started and want to figure out how code hangs together. And there's a learn module as well, so you can run through that as well. Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. One last session now.
Any other questions on the chat? Right, awesome. Cool, thank you. Right. What's that?
It's a conference tech. It's like an information architecture kind of conference. Sorry, I think we're
Going to be using any of that.
your presenter. We're using record phones currently.
Yeah.
Recording. That's good. Thank you. She gave us. Thank you.
Session's not. Session's not on an hour. Say, you can come to us.
Yeah, I am.
Both days. Are you going to come to us?
No. Well, I'm decided yet.
Yeah.
I'll only go as a visitor if I do. I've only applied for. I've only really applied for this, the which is.
Oh, I forgot to advise that in time. She was like, so it was message commenting and says, oh, you did apply for the month Copilot for this. Probably now. And I'm like, yeah.
So, that's the last session of the day. So hopefully you guys not tired a little bit after listening over Microsoft Copilot and custom plugins and connectors. So I'm gonna skim through the bits we have covered. So I don't want to go back to the slides which you already covered, but please send me ask me a question, or stop me and ask me a question, because I want you to take away, some things it can help you solve your problem. So my name is E. Johnson. I'm MVP, and I'm a developer and architect, work for a company called Advania UK. Please go and get in touch if you have any question, any problem. My Twitter handle and LinkedIn. So feel free to ping me. I'm happy to help if you have any questions. So let's get to the next one. So I'm going to skim through some of the things we covered. So before we get into the Copilot and plugin connectors, I want to understand what is Copilot. So we know it's a productivity tool. We know it's a great assistance skills. I mean, I use every single day, summarize my email, rewrite my emails, meetings to understand what's going on in the meetings, etc. So that's great. But this is where we're focusing. My session we're focusing on this knowledge, where we're bringing the custom your business data into the Copilot. So that's what I'm focusing on this side of work. Extensibility. One, we've seen this one in two presentations previously, so I'll probably go really, really quickly. So where the extensibility comes in, like your business application data might not be compatible with the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So this is where we basically go to the extensibility. So how can you make your data talk to Copilot and use the Copilot to you can reason over your data and ask Copilot the question you wanted to ask. So that's where extensibility come into place. Plugins, you already skills and plugin we covered. Customize Copilot, transfer your app into plugin. This is where we come in. Enrich the organization knowledge to accessible Copilot by ingesting your enterprise data. So that's where Microsoft Graph Connectors comes into play, and that's what I'm looking into it, and we're going to what we would do. Now, with the extensibility, when we talk about, there's two different ways. One is plugin, one is a connector. So because I'm doing this in Microsoft Graph Connector way. So basically, you get the external data, you use the Microsoft Graph Connector, put the data into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, and then as a user from the Copilot, you ask a question, and Copilot knows your data, and you reason over your data, the data which is already indexed. Types of connector, I'm gonna probably go quickly here. We've already gone through it, out of the box connectors, and then, custom connectors. Custom connectors have flexibility as a developer and architect point of view. As you have a full control over it. What kind of data you wanted to ingest, or the permission you wanted to set up, and what does the crawl mechanism look like? So everything you controlled. So you can handle everything. So that is the good thing about the custom connector. If the developers and the architect in the house, they love it if you have a full control. Right. So when we build the connectors, what are the building blocks? I think that Lee already gone through some of them, all of them. So I'm just going to quickly go through it. So we have, we create a connection, external connection, which involved definition, schema, and external item. Number 2, connects to external data source and ingest into Microsoft. And then this is your external kind of a content. So we also, when we create external item after the schema, we'll go through into detail in a minute. We have a properties, we have a content, we have ACLS, we have activities. So there's quite a few things going on at the moment. So now we'll go through into code in a minute, but some bits are quite important when we're creating external graph connectors. One is you can create a graph connectors, but if you don't supply the labels, semantic labels with it, you do not mention ACLs. This is very, very important. Activities and some metadata. So the data will get ingested, but then the Copilot wouldn't know that. So then you don't get that intelligent experience you wanted from the Copilot. So the Copilot, the way I see the Copilot is you are on the driving seat, not the Copilot. So you tell Copilot, if you want to get intelligent experience, you need to make aware the Copilot, yes, this is the data I have, this is the labels you already ingested, this is the semantic descriptions you already provided, then he will be intelligent. So at the end of the day, this is how I see it, that you are on the driving seat. So you need to tell Copilot, like, act intelligently on your data. So what are the connected experience? Once your data is in the index and is Copilot is aware of that, you have you can access through Copilot 365 chat. Microsoft, you will be able to access Microsoft Search, 365 apps like Word, Excel, Outlooks, so Teams, Viva platform, and you will also have your context IQ as well. So yeah, all these experiences available once the data is in there. Some of the best practices when we to improve the relevance. First of all, the description. Provide the rich human readable description for connection. That's very important. Same as the plugin that we've seen before. A detailed description about if it's an API, detailed description, what your API does, what is possible functions are available. When user send a request, what do you expect from it? So detailed description, that's what Copilot uses it. Semantic label in the schema. Some of the, you may apply the searchable property label to schema property. So that is one of the requirement for the Copilot. So make it searchable to be able to find, so then he can basically query and search result on it. So make the searchable, whatever the property you want the Copilot to reason over, make sure you make them as searchable. Add user activities on the item. So more activity you will add on the item. For example, when was the last, who last modified this, who last views that. So these activities also helps when it's going to search your content. Because Copilot doesn't just search against your own custom data. It has your whole Microsoft 365 data with it next to it as well. So make sure if you want your users to, for example, specifically search your custom data, to make sure you have your proper label and semantic label and activities and make them searchable, provide the proper description. So it doesn't get, it will look into files, it will look Copilot into your OneDrive, your mails, your chats and conversation, but also if you have these properly defined, then it will go and query these one as well. If I get to the next, now I think that is very important when you are ingesting and giving your data to Microsoft Copilot. Data stay within the customer tenant, so it doesn't use, your data does not get used to train a language model, and your sensitive information is protected, especially if you're dealing with the Microsoft Graph Connector data. There's a ACL, so you are in control on who can access what information, who can access that. So if it's a confidential, you can protect using the same Azure groups via the ACL. So today, my sample is about, I'm using, everybody used Microsoft Learn modules, right? So we go there, look, and it's really nice tutorials there, nice modules there. So what I've used is, I've used that API as an example. So it happened that this API is a public API. So you can query yourself. So there's no need to authentication. So it's really nice for demos. So I'm using that API and querying using the Azure function. And then at the moment I'm using HTTP trigger, but you can use the timer trigger, queue trigger to build some crawling mechanism as well with your connector. So what I'm doing is I'm putting the data into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So my graph connector and the Copilot knows about it. And then we can see what's that look like in practice. So let me just give you a demo first, because I want to show you what it looks like, and then we can have some conversation on it. So let me just get to let's get to the SharePoint first. Oh, because so we will look at this demo and then we go into the code as well. Oh, I'm not sharing this screen. Okay, so I have to share it again.
Yeah, you just have to drag it to that.
Drag it to that one. Oh, that's good. So let's look into the SharePoint. Okay, so this is going to be really hard to type. Okay, so I'm searching for here. Let's say Azure functions. So you can see here, the results which are coming here, it's from my graph connector. And I think one of the Lee was talking about the adaptive card. So I've used the adaptive card, I customize it so that make it look like, so you can use either out of the box search results, or you can still use within the SharePoint as well. You can use that adaptive card to make it look like exactly how you want it to look like. So now, and you can get the same experience. You got a pagination, except so it's going to search that. And one thing, if you notice this, let me search it Azure function again, I can search some bit more as well. Sorry. Let me just do it this way. So I'm going to search, let's say, some Viva connection, or there you go. So it's going to pull back all, whatever this API, I've ingested the content in the connector. I think that at the moment, as the last I ingested, there are 3,800 Learn modules available on the site, which I've ingested in my tenant. So now, if you look at this, is called last modified. So that does not come like SharePoint is added by itself. So it's one of the property which I've made aware of the Copilot using the label, using the searchable, and now I can actually filter this one here. So I'm going to ask him, give me the modules Viva connection which has been modified in the past month. So you can see here I've got the filter result back as well. So now at the moment there are about, I think, 8 or 9 or 10 semantic labels for the Copilots available, like last modified, URL, icons, path. So you can use all of them based on what kind of data you are ingesting. So might be, I think in the future, they expand on this one. You may be able to more add the labels based on your requirement. At the moment, make use of whatever the Copilot's labels are available. So that is the experience. So you can go from all, or you can go to your Learn API. So you would know that you will only get result from your own custom connector. So that is what experience look like in SharePoint. So let's now go to the Copilot now. So let me refresh this and move this as well. Well, let's look at this one. And I'm going to say, and I'm on the work. So bear in mind, if you see here, I'm not on the web, I'm in the work tab. So I'm talking about my work now. So I'm asking him to look into my own tenant. Don't go outside. So I'm going to say, okay. Now over there, if you notice, I've just typed the Azure function, and the search is using, probably matching the title and bringing my result. But here I'm going to type in my natural language. So that is the difference. So I'm going to say, okay, how to develop an Azure function. So let's see if he's going to pull. So now he's pulling back result from and is showing some references. We can look into what references he's pulled back. So if I go into one, click on it, take me there straight away. If I open up this one, so you could see here all of the modules which are ingested in my tenant. So you expand this one and see this is external data you have ingested. So that's very, very cool. But you can also, not just this one, because I asked him how to develop an Azure function. And then if you have specified, like, for example, in my case, I've specified the last modified time, which is one of the property returned by my API. And that could be anything in your data source. So I'm going to ask him the same question, but I'm going to ask him, okay, only show me module which are last modified last month, right? So let's see if he can filter that and only show me. So he couldn't find anything in the Azure function side of thing. Let's see if he could, let me pull up some Viva connection one, if it's anything modified in the Viva connection last month. So let me come here. Because I did search. It seems like he's not bringing back that Viva connection for the past month. So let me just try it again. Come on, Copilot. There you go. This time he's found that one. So yeah, it's so past month. I think if we look at our the SharePoint experience, you notice that we had about 7 or 8 on the page. So now we have a filter down the results. So now, and you can go back and further, reason over your further question on this, what responses come back. And that's the whole about the LLM, basically. We're not restricted on specific, okay, we're going to only search the title. We can only search what's in the title. You can ask your own question. And sometimes we come across where he's not able to give you answer based on from your connectors. So, but he knows the answer. He will give you answer kind of from his knowledge, from other sources as well. If whatever the sources is going to bring back, it will list that here. Because now I'm talking about more of it's quite a few new tenant, and there's no more information like there's no many files, no many chat conversations. So he's more focused on that bit. But you will come across some of the Lee shown me. There was one external source of was it some he picked up from external URL as well? Probably one of your response from the Copilot.
Yes, it did. Yeah, it's asking what's the most common coffee or something.
Coffee, something like that. So yeah, just keep an eye on. Again, this depends on if you are specifically querying your data source, then most probably it will answer you from your data source. So yeah, I'm gonna. You can then, for example, one more prompt I would like to use is probably quite complex kind of thing. Okay, how to use retrieval pattern with Azure AI. So it's gonna go and try and look for that information and bring back. So you can you can search and reason over your data. That's really great. So let's look into the next experience.
Sorry, so can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So in this context, is Microsoft Graph acting as like a sort of vector database for the LLM? If so, is there a limit to how much results you can pull in to the prompt that's happening in the backend?
So, I mean, there is a, what do you mean by limit?
So if you typically if you're using a vector database in an LLM context, you're essentially enriching a prompt in the back, right? So you're asking it to do a certain search. It's going to go pull up in a vector database the results, like a bunch of them. It's going to throw it into the prompt that it goes and throws to the LLM to reason.
Yes. How many?
Right. And in that kind of architecture, you have a limit to the number of results you can sort of stuff into that prompt. I don't know, is that what?
A number of the limitation, like with the graph, but I think what I'm noticing these ones, the 3 to 30 responses, but it might be is restriction, how many kind of chats within the one conversation, how many kind of chat and responses you can have. So there might be conversation around that, some limitation, but I don't have any limitation. Something probably I can look into that one. Yeah, definitely there will be some limitation. I don't see
Has the same,
exactly. So they
same limitation as any other.
so I don't see, but yeah, definitely we can look into exact numbers. So yeah, we can just quickly briefly look into the code and see how that in. Sorry, before I show you the code, I wanted to show the one more experience, which is the Outlook. So let me bring the Outlook screen. And the team, sorry. So Teams, this was my Copilot. Team has the, if you're in the Copilot in the Teams, so ask the same question. So let's say, how to develop an Azure function using CLI. So you want to see what the experience looks like from this side. And then we can go to the Outlook. What's the experience in the Outlook as well?
Quick question.
Yeah.
The graph connector, how much content is in the the content section of the
Item.
the item. Yeah, is it got like? Because I noticed this is producing results from the. It's not just the metadata of the learning module.
Yeah.
It looks like it's returning a good chunk of the, what's relevant content as well.
Yeah.
It'd be quite big.
Is it quite big? Yeah.
It's really nice.
So there is so you can see the reference within the Teams Copilot. You have this like a reference. You get this data from here. So if I click on this one, it takes me to that module straight away from there, so that you could see its reference correctly. Now the next, I wanted to show you the Outlook. So what's the experience like in Outlook? Now, if I go in email, now this is something which is not working as I wanted to work. It might be something I need to plug in something more, but the experience I wanted to achieve was, so one experience is working here. Like if I click on this Copilot, and I can ask the question. So about my data source, which is good. So I can ask, okay, tell me a bit more about the viewer connections, let's suppose, right? So that's good. So it's going to give me the results back. But I can copy this and paste into my team and access and send the email. That's great because, but what I wanted to do is, apart from this ones, you could see here, is build some references. Let me just expand the references. So it's build some in this UI. You could see it's external. This is the URL. This is a bit of title. But what I wanted to do is basically, now it might be something is I need to plug in something more or to configure differently. If I press the forward tab, and as we access, I don't have so many files at the moment in the tenant. So if we access the files, we access our emails and chats using this /. So we can embed, add within that chat, excuse me. But at the same time, what I want to do is to call my graph connector and ask the question, okay, and then the graph connector should be able to pick up the result you select and then embed as a adaptive card within the email. I think that experience, it is there. It's a context IQ is available for the graph connector. It might be something I need to work on more to plug in properly. So keep that in mind as well. With the context IQ does work with the graph connectors as well. So that experience. So for example, if I type Azure, learn catalog API. So you could see here is pick up this one. But what it's not doing me is not giving me suggestions. So it's gone ahead and going to the external endpoint, but it's not giving me suggestions. It might be something I've not configured correctly. So I was expecting it showing me a list of all the module here. So as soon as I select the module, it insert the same adaptive card which I've specified. That's the experience I wanted. So that's probably something to work on. That's the experience from the Outlook as well. So quickly to wrap up, I don't want to take lots of time. You guys already typed. So now that is this is where let me just zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I've used some different Azure functions. So let me just quickly close all this and give you overview of how I build this. You can see here I have a managed connection, so I can create a connection same way as Lee has showed from the client side. This is the .NET version of that. So either way, if you are comfortable with the .NET side of thing, you can use SDK. Is really, really powerful for the graph connector. I'm using not SDK. I'm making a graph API calls without the SDK. There is a reason behind it. So the reason behind was I started with the SDK and I worked out correctly. But what I was doing was, now as a organization, you wanted to some point want to do all this manually, right? So you want to have some sort of automation. So as a admin, Teams admin or the global admin, you want to go, you know what? There is a graph connector you want to enable in your organization. That's all you want to do. You not care about what's this look like, right? All the scribbling and the red and the black code. So what you can do is to build integrate with your team's admin experience. So what that means, you can build the webhook API, the connector webhook API. As soon as you enable that toggle, there's a manifest app you have to build. And as soon as you enable that toggle in your team's administration, what happens is it calls your external web application, where it says, oh, hey, someone has enabled this in the teams and this particular connector. When you enable this, it sends the connector ID and the connector ticket to your custom API endpoint. Now, what can you do with this connector API and connector ticket is you can go and do this all behind the scene. You can create a connection, you can register the schema, you can ingest the content. But when you create a connection, what you do is, let me go to one of the service. I'm not doing it, but this is something you want to take is away as well. This is also one of the thing you can do. So create a connection. I'm not doing this one, but I can pass here. So you get the connector ID and the connector ticket with the as a part of the payload, which comes from the Microsoft Teams, right? And now you go and pass this connector ticket and the connector ID. I'm going to expand this one if I can. So if I just go into implementation, right? So if I expand this one, here, if you see here, connector ticket, right? So if you have a connector ticket, you give this as a part of the request header. Now, what happened here now? You then go ahead and then, same way, carry on with the payload, create a connection, give a descriptive description about your connector. It's here quite long, I have, so that you can understand what my connectors do. That's for the Copilot. So what it does is, it go ahead and create the connection. And as soon as you create a connection, he's going to send a response back to your Microsoft Teams admin. Hey, this particular connector ticket, so the connector which is associated with this connector ticket has created, and now it can enable this toggle for you in the behind the scene. So for an admin, you just need to toggle it. It will do everything behind the scene, trigger the custom code. And if you want to switch it off, you can also handle that as well. So if you switch it off, it sends you a kind of a one of the parameters say is uninstall or delete connector. So based on you pick up within your custom code, what request comes is switch off, you can remove the connector, uninstall through your API. So you can be pretty much turning on, turning off from the team administration. That's what the connector ticket look like. If you have that experience, build that experience, you don't have to kind of do manually by yourself. So yeah, this is the same. I'm passing this adaptive card to pass up my requests, and that adaptive card is in here. If I go to result.json, which you already seen this in the SharePoint search results. So that's adaptive card I built. And then after the connection has been made, I have go back to the graph service again. I'm gonna go and delete connection, create schema. So my schema simple look like a summary. I wanted to get summary levels and I wanted to show you the labels. So for example, module title happen to be the name as title, and there's a Copilot labels title is available. So basically again label it against that. Then I used icon URL. Then I used the last modified date time, which is against my last modify coming from my database or my API. So in my case, I think as Lee was explaining, in my case, the URL looked like a path, but the label is URL. So I put URL against my path. So that's what I understand is the path. So yeah, so just create a schema, and then at the end you just simply create ingest the item. So which is just get past your properties based on your schema, and then add into that and ingest the data. So that's basic. As soon as the data will be available, I'm not sure if I just show you what's that look like once the data has been ingested. Is I think it's good to just go to the data sources. That's what the experience look like. So you can see I have a 3,803 item, which is ingested. Well, I'm using the trial version for the, I could go up to like a 1 million or something at the moment. But the default limit is, I think, is a 500, but based on the licensing, you can add up, get more in there. But if you look at the 500, it's, to be honest, it's not 500. Yeah, right. So if you have like a 300 user in your organization, so multiply by 500, because 500 is per license, you still get a lot of data. Imagine if you have 300 into 500 into 300 users, you still get a lot of chunk of data. You can freely use this one. But still, if you have like 1 million of record, that's a different ballgame. But if you do the calculation, you still get lots of data. If you have lots of user in your organization with a valid Microsoft 365 E5 or E3 licensing. So here, I want to show you quickly. If I go to select the all, go to manage result, and that is what the Lee was referring to. Make sure shows result inline is ticked and your connector is Microsoft Learn Connector is ticked, your custom one, then the Copilot would know that. If you go to verticals again, and this is, you can create your own vertical, and you can build like filters, queries, etc. yourself. And I think that it's pretty much is actually. If you have any, this is the search setting which I've created, and the via the result connection, and this is adaptive card being added into it. If you pass adaptive card, it will be stored here, and you can manually update here as well, by the way. So if you don't pass as an optional, you can go and copy paste the adaptive card right in there. It will update as well. So yeah, that's all about it. If you have any question, please feel free to ask me.
Maybe this is for everyone that's presented, but why do we need to ingest everything into Graph, and why can't we just go directly to the source? So, like, for example, if you have Salesforce with like basically an indestructible API, it is always up all the time. Why can't you just go directly to it and sort of give a schema to the service so that it knows what to search and where to search, versus ingesting everything into Graph and then having to go through Graph?
I think, yeah. I think the main difference is the LLM, because if you go directly to the source, you won't be able to use a natural language. That is the main difference. So with the LLM, and then yeah. So if you have, because this is where the Copilot and the LLM and the AI comes into play. So you can ask questions which you cannot ask a natural language with. I can build any super API which can handle all different 10 or 100 scenarios, but still as a common user, they want to ask a simple question and to get an answer. I think this is where the Copilot and LLM come into play.
Yeah, you're just replicating a lot of data though.
Yeah, so with that is where which extensibility path is good for your scenario. Whether you want to go to plugin, which is you go talking directly and you're not replicating anything. But that means, as the Paul explained, you need to build again skills, and still you have a limitation in how much functionality or skills you can expose from your API. So, and if you want to go with the Microsoft Graph connector side of things, so that's extensibility kind of a path you wanted to choose based on the business scenario.
So there's one other benefit to having it in the search engine is they're optimized for very high speed retrieval, whereas your API, if someone searched for Viva connections, that API, poor thing, may not be scaled to handle the load that if you imagine that you've got an organization of 10,000 users and you suddenly go, I want to have a look at their modules, and that poor API has to handle that massive load. So, I mean, a lot of search systems, it doesn't have to be Microsoft, like Google and all that, they take copies of everything, so that when you do that sort of retrieval, you've got that really, really quick response. Like,
It's cached, isn't it?
yeah,
Basically?
yeah, it's like super high speed cache.
I mean, that's
So they can respond
That's
in
probably
a
the
timely
way
form.
with-
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the Microsoft Graph Connectors, the crawling bit is also very powerful if we set it up right. So, for example, the recommendation is to not crawl again and again to get everything from your external source and put it again up. Like, for example, every end of the day, you go and get the latest data. That's one of the possibility. But the recommendation is, if once your data in there, look for the trigger. So what has changed in your external system? So based on that change, you trigger your crawler or crawler app, which takes probably one item or two items. It can bring that item from the graph or index and then update only that information, which will have a kind of a lightweight as crawler as well, based on your trigger.
I think the other thing to going back to querying keeping the data in Salesforce, you go back to the problem that all of a sudden you lose all restrictions in ACL, because ultimately if you're querying the API directly from effectively Copilot is querying the API, it's not querying it as context of you. So I mean, so because you in M365 is not you in Salesforce. You see what I mean? So all of a sudden, if you're effectively opening up the whole of Salesforce to be queried, then you lose any ACLs.
Yeah, this is the bit that I'm trying to understand in general of like, you have access control inside Salesforce, and then you have access control inside Azure, but the middle bit is removing all access control, because you need to then replicate the access control somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So, it's that bit that is very complex. It's not as straightforward as just ingesting the data.
No, not if the data is, like you say, to the point where it has to be segmented. If it's something like you say, it's like a knowledge base, or it's something like learn modules, or something that's just like it's useful for everyone and everyone should be able to access it, then yes, absolutely, it's straightforward. But if there is complex access restrictions here, like say, you've got to be careful. You don't want to expose the data.
Yeah, because like if you have, I suppose the thing that I'm trying to understand is if you have SSO set up on Salesforce that uses Azure to authenticate the user into Salesforce so they can log in, why can't you use that?
Yeah, I think it's just.
Can I answer this?
Yeah, you go for it.
I've not used this, but my understanding is Microsoft Graph is a RAG system. What you're doing here is RAG.
Yeah.
So you're vectorizing data. That's why you need to ingest it. That's why you lose all your ACL, right? So we need to put this all into Microsoft Graph, because Microsoft Graph is vectorizing
crunching it,
emails, vectorizing documents, vectorizing Salesforce data if you choose to ingest it, vectorizing this content as an external database so that it can understand it in the same language. So when you semantically give it a natural language query, SQL query or a simple term like BERT, text search, it will be able to search through semantically through that vector. Right. So it needs to index those vectors. So it needs to put them all into the same vector database. But doing so in the implementation as it stands, it's lost its ACLs, right? It's lost all its access controls. So that's I think the answer to that.
Go back to the plugins. Plugins can allow you to query an API directly. But obviously, like it's been said, it's because that data isn't being indexed or vectorized. You're effectively, it's working differently. The Copilot on Graph Connectors is looking at what you've asked for, going through the data, coming through it and going, this is the data that you asked for, here it is. Whereas on a plugin, you're asking it a question in a natural language and it's going, what you really want is me to run this skill or ask this question on your behalf of this API, but it has no idea if the data coming back is actually relevant to that. Because it's just said, so for example, I did a plugin for TFL services. So I go like, what's the status of the number 99, I don't think what's the status of the number 99 bus? And it will just go off and query the TfL API with, box number 99, what's the status? But it has no context. It doesn't know, it's just effectively it's a way of translating a natural language question into calling an API, which is basically what you want to do in Salesforce. So to all intents and purposes, you could do what you want to do and query Salesforce directly using a plugin. But like I said, the problem you've got there is that your application, your code is effectively running the query as an application rather than as you. And I don't know that much about Salesforce. When I use Salesforce API, you create like an app registration equivalent, and you choose the user that it runs against. And obviously that user then, all the data that plugin would ever get would just be from that context of that particular user, not the user that's actually using Copilot. So if that user has access to everything, all of a sudden, whatever ACLs that person has in Salesforce would be circumvented by the plugin.
Am I right in saying that the ACLs for the graph connectors represent?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So you would possibly be able to replicate the Salesforce groups as external groups.
Potentially, yeah. I think it's totally possible. Like in that particular scenario, we're talking Salesforce to graph connectors. It's absolutely possible to do. But like I say, it's not just what we've shown here is it's simply 3 steps and away you go. Obviously, things like ACLs, there's more to it than that.
Yeah. So I mean, you have a control on every data. So if you have a large amount of data you want to ingest and you have some confidentiality bit to maintain, you definitely need to plan properly. Like which bit we need to. We can only have certain people access. But the good thing is you have a capability. Yeah, it looks is not straightforward from the UI kind of thing, but you have a capability. You can define and we have a flexibility to do that if you wanted to. So that's all from me. If you have any more questions.
Would I be right in saying for plugins then the authentication is just done through Azure AD and your calls from Copilot are within the user context?
So I need to run in a sec. Just quickly, so the authentication that is by default is between Teams and the extension part is covered by Azure AD. The call out to my